Councillors, good morning. We will kick the meeting off at 9:09. Welcome to round 864. As always, a very good morning to AGM Alicia Swain, our city officers, and all attending committee members today. I don't have any attendance or apologies to deal with and no leaves of absence requests. So I'll move straight to item 3 and seek a confirmer for the minutes of the previous round. Councillor Doran, a seconder. Councillor Gates, any issues with the minutes before we take the vote? In that case, everyone happy to accept? As we are, everyone's in favour. Item 4, conflict of interest declarations. I think we have a couple to deal with now. We might just get them out of the way now, I think is easiest. Are they loaded for the appeals? Yeah, that's okay. I just wanted to check, Councillor Fowler, Councillor Young, are you intending to air your normal thing about New Crush when we have the updated appeals report? We've dealt with it that many times now, but do you want to air it again, or just happy to accept that it's been done a million times? In the quarterly appeals update. Up to you guys if you want to just air it for the public record, as we do every time.
Thank you.
Councillor Young, would you like to go first?
No, let Councillor.
Councillor Fowler, would you like to go first?
Thank you, Chair. Just in regards to item 6.3, which is the quarterly appeals report, I just make note that the New Crush appeal is mentioned in that report. As councillors know, my property is in close proximity to the residents and I have clearance on the matter to vote and make decisions on the matter.
Yeah, correct. And as always, the appeals update is just an update. There's no decisions of this committee or council that have an effect on the appeal. So, as we have always done previously with Councillor Fowler and Councillor Young, I'm happy for her to participate. I'll check for the public record that no committee member has a changed position on that or a question. Councillor Young, you ready?
Likewise, I'll make a declaration or draw attention of the committee to the fact that I have a conflict of interest in regard to New Crush Proprietary Limited appeal, which is listed on page 567 of the confidential report. I've been granted consent from council in the past to participate in voting and decisions on the matter, and I'm just airing that for the benefit of the public in particular. Thanks, Chair.
Again, for the public record, can I check that no committee member present has an issue or concern to raise with that again today? Councillor Patterson?
It just might be worth mentioning what the conflict is.
In my particular regard, my place of residence is within 700 metres of the site of the quarry.
Yep, that's fine. So just checking that everyone is happy, as we have done previously with Councillor Young, that he's just airing that. It's just the quarterly appeals update and there's no need for a declarable conflict form to be dealt with. Very good. Councillor Gates?
Thanks, Chairman. I went through these appeals last night and there's one that I saw for Gasman Development Perspectives, who've been donors to me over a long period of time, not in the last 10 years. And on previous occasions also the council has agreed to my participation. But there were a couple of consultants and I didn't mark them, unfortunately. But the Gasman Development is the most significant one. And so I would like to check with the committee whether they feel that I need to make a declaration of some sort in that one.
So, committee members, we have dealt with Councillor Gates's conflict with Gasman Development Perspectives several times and noted it's well outside the relevant term now, and she's had approval to deal on several matters where they're involved. So unless there's a committee member that has a concern with that, noting it is just the quarterly appeals update and there is no decision of this committee or council that could have an effect on that appeal. Very good. Councillor Gates, looks like we have no issues there. Do you have any other ones you need to flag?
Well, UPS are mentioned in one as well. I can't find them right now, but it's the same situation, Chairman, where I think I've been cleared on most now because it's so far out of the relevant term, and I believe the council has supported my participation, and especially in regard to the appeals. I mean, I don't have any comment to make about the appeals at all this morning.
Understood. relevant term for Councillor Gates, I think, is back before 2020.
The relevant term is the current term and the term prior.
Yep.
And I have not accepted a donation of any kind since 2016, so it's 10 years.
Any other conflict of interest declarations that councillors would like to put forward or air? Councillor Martin.
Chair, not a conflict as such, but I just thought I'd like to make a comment just for councillors' background. For item 6.1 today, there's a development application for 1425 and 1427 Gold Coast Highway. I spoke with legal, and for council's awareness, I have owned in the past 1427 Gold Coast Highway as a house. I don't own it anymore, have no interest, and I've sold it. I sold it in 2015, and it's been bought and sold multiple times since then. I didn't sell to the developer. So just for the committee's background, I have been an owner, but I've considered my position, and I don't believe there's any declaration.
Bet you wish you still owned it now. Should have held that one. Okay. Thank you, Councillor Martin. Thank you for airing that. I think we can all have comfort that there's no issue to be dealt with there, but thank you for putting it on the record in case a member of the public chooses to. I'll take that there's no formal conflict of interest declarations to be dealt with today, which I think is 2 committees in a row, which is a new record. I love it. With that, we will move to the starred items. As they always do, Councillor Gates. So, I note 5.1 isn't starred, however. So was that an intent of officers? Is there something in 5.1?
I do not know. That's not asked, Chair.
So maybe we'll start on a positive. Is everyone happy to star 5.1? Very good. So we'll star that. Councillors, items we wish to unstar. Councillor Gates. 6.2 is unstarred. Councillor Martin.
6.1, Chair.
6.1. Councillor Fowler.
6.3 and 6.4, please, Chair.
Boom, boom. So in that case, we will deal with item 5.1. I'm happy to move that. Seek a seconder. Councillor Gates, all those in favour. 5.1 is carried, which takes us to our substantive items, and we'll move to 6.1. Welcome the team in.
Excuse me, Chairman, this one involves UPS, which I presume I don't need to. Thank you. Highlight.
I think you've aired that sufficiently. Councillor Martin, I'm guessing we're doing the presentation?
Yes, please. Thanks,
No
Chair.
worries.
Cool. Thank you. Through the chair, good morning, councillors. This is a material change of use to establish multiple dwellings consisting of 68 units at 1425 and 1427 Gold Coast Highway in Palm Beach. The subject site was previously improved by a 7-unit multiple dwelling at 1425, which is the southern lot shown on screen there with the brown roof, and a dwelling house at 1427, which is the northern lot there shown with the blue roof. The surrounding development generally comprises residential uses, which can be characterised by a mix of dwelling houses, dual occupancies and multiple dwellings, with a variety of built form typologies including tower forms. A separate development permit was issued on the 3rd of December 2025 for a 29-metre high multiple dwelling development consisting of 47 units at this site. This was proposed by the same applicant. This is the subject site as viewed from across Gold Coast Highway looking northeast. The purpose of this image is to depict the existing development typology surrounding the subject site, which includes tower forms. The site is located within the medium density residential zone and is afforded a building height provision of 29 metres by the building height overlay map. The development triggers impact assessment as a result of the building height exceeding the building height overlay. The proposal seeks to establish a multiple dwelling consisting of 64 2-bedroom units and 4 3-bedroom units within a 43.43 metre tall tower form. The ground floor incorporates vehicular access from 25th Avenue, as well as visitor parking, pedestrian access, landscaping and communal open space. Visual interest to the tower form is provided through built form articulation and varied materiality on all facades, along with landscaping both at ground and on structure at the Gold Coast Highway frontage. Officers consider the development delivers an excellent standard of appearance. The Gold Coast Highway facade incorporates both articulation and materiality changes to the edges of the tower form, which is carried through to the base and the ground plane. Figures also depict changed design language to the two upper recess levels, which are consistent with the prevailing design language of the development. The subject site is located in the northern aspect of Palm Beach's coastal strip, which is characterised by both the medium density residential zone and the 29-metre code accessible building height overlay. Officers have considered the northern aspect of the coastal strip in considering local character. The applicant provided an analysis of tower approvals across the entire coastal strip, which demonstrates the proliferation of tower form developments along the Palm Beach's coastline, both below the 29-metre code accessible building height and above, with several examples meeting that maximum 50% uplift of 43.5 metres. There are several existing and approved tower forms within the vicinity of the subject site as shown. Number 2 and 30 are located adjacent to the subject site along the esplanade, both of which are slightly above that 29-metre code accessible building height at 31.5 metres. Development of the same scale at 43.5 metres is shown at numbers 39, 18 and 17, the closest being 39 at 1293 to 1299 Gold Coast Highway, which is approximately 680 metres south of the subject site. There are also several existing and approved code accessible tower forms in the immediate vicinity of the subject site. The key being number 3 at 460 the Esplanade, which is constructed at 29 metres and directly adjoins the subject site to the northeast. As reported, officers consider the development is consistent with the existing and emerging character of the area. The development incorporates 3 basement levels for parking, circulation and services. It's noted the development provides an acceptable outcome compliant rate of car parking for both residents and visitors. The site is subject to a 2.8 metre wide road widening setback as it fronts the Gold Coast Highway. The development has considered this by ensuring there will be landscaping beyond the future fence line, which is shown in transparent blue on the plan, and retains the cutout sections which are provided to Gold Coast Highway to provide more significant landscaping beds at the street level. It's also important to note the proposed feature cook pine tree on the corner of the 25th Avenue and Gold Coast Highway intersection will be retained following future road resumption. The development provides 4 units at level 1 within a built form that's sufficiently set back from all the boundaries. The typical tower plate incorporates 6 units per level. In terms of design, reference is made to the recesses at both the western and eastern facades, which are of significant scale, 7 metres in depth to the west and 5.3 metres to the east. This, combined with other articulation and materiality, results in a well-defined tower form. Level 12 is the first of the 2 upper levels, both of which are recessed as compared to the below typical tower floor plate. Additional on-structure planting is provided at this level to the Gold Coast Highway facade. Level 13 mirrors the below in terms of recessing and floor plate and incorporates 2 3-bed units. The roof above incorporates a centralised mechanical plant services enclosure. The elevation sections depict the proposed development in reference to a 43.5 metre offset from natural ground level, which is of course the limit of the uplift test, shown by a blue dotted line. Officers have reviewed the proposed building height in detail as it's close to the maximum of 50% and confirm the plans accurately depict building height at 43.43 metres. As mentioned, the subject site's in close proximity to existing and approved tower forms between 29 and 31.5 metres in height. This figure depicts the proposed development relative to the existing tower form, which is 29 metres high at 460 the Esplanade. Whilst the proposed development is taller, officers consider the development appropriately addresses interfaces and the differentiation in height assists with providing a varied, ordered and interesting local skyline as required by the uplift test. The proposal is compliant with acceptable outcome 8.1 and 8.2 of the General Development Provisions Code, which considers shadowing impacts. This is achieved through the lack of a southern adjoining neighbour and a slender tower form, which facilitates small and fast-moving shadows. The development attracted a total of 269 properly made submissions, 22 not properly made submissions, both in the immediate area surrounding the subject site and the wider Palm Beach area. Of these submissions, 230 were properly made objections and 39 were properly made in support. Whilst officers acknowledge the concerns raised by submitters, through the assessment process, officers have concluded the proposal is consistent with the applicable assessment benchmarks of the city plan, including the uplift tested strategic framework. The matters raised by submitters have been addressed throughout the reporting. Therefore, officers recommend this application be approved subject to conditions.
Councillors, questions for officers? Councillor Young.
Thanks, Chairman. Could we go back to slide 20, which depicts the shadow diagrams? And I'm interested in the shadow effect on that building to the immediate east, which was on a slide prior to this one you showed, the two side by side. Yeah, thank you. So I'm interested in the shadow impacts on Shan, is it?
Yeah, at 460, yes.
Thank you. And how that would affect people's use of their current balconies or whatever they might have on that side of the building. Can you go back to the shadow diagram? Because it looks like it's going to have some effect, and I'm just trying to comprehend what that is, please. On the top right, it's showing at 3 p.m. an impact in the summer for a short period of time, but affecting virtually all of that building.
Through the chair. There's probably a few ways to answer this question. The first one is just to show how the development to the east positions itself in relation to this development. I'll just go back to one of the images provided earlier. It's important to note that western facade of the eastern development doesn't provide any balconies. It essentially turns its back on this subject site, which means that any potential shadow impacts wouldn't be negligible to that tower, given it shouldn't impact the access to sunlight for those units. Additionally, given that it's located to the east and not in a north-south orientation, the shadow should move quickly and should resolve any shadowing impacts quickly throughout the day.
Thank you. My concern is addressed. Thanks, Chair.
Thanks, Councillor Young. Questions? Councillor Patterson's up first.
Thank you, through you, Chair. Just on that same, on the shadow, if you could just go back to the shadow page. I appreciate the west in summer is possibly even an advantage, but the southern, the winter ones, that's quite a far distance across, right? I'm looking at the bottom right-hand corner. So you've got a road in between before it's starting to impact on residents there, right?
Through the chair. As mentioned, the acceptable outcome, which controls shadow impacts, being 8.1 and 8.2 of the General Development Provisions Code, considers the floor plate and its slender nature. It provides a ratio between depth and width, which results in a slender tower form, which means that the shadow moves quickly throughout the day. If the tower form itself was more elongated from east to west, it would result on potentially a further impact, as the shadow would move more slowly throughout the day.
Councillor Martin.
Thanks, Chair. Just so you can confirm, so this already has a code approval, but this has come through as an MCU. Just wondering why it's not an other change.
The purpose, as I understand it, the lodging two separate applications is based on commercial reasons. So the land holding costs, etc., sort of would encourage development or construction to occur earlier rather than later. So the code and the impact application basement levels perfectly align. So the developer can can undergo with the development associated with the code and start digging the basement levels and allow the impact process to run its course, and then proceed with the impact application once that's approved, given that the basement levels perfectly align.
Sorry, I don't actually think we addressed Councillor Martin's direct question then, which was, we're well aware of that tactic, but normally that comes with an other change instead of an MCU.
Through the chair, that both options of lodging either an other change or I'll say a fresh MCU are both lawful. This application was properly made, had all the requirements that it needed to have met under the Planning Act, so that was just the applicant's prerogative. There is no restriction for them to lodge a certain type of application one way or another.
Okay. Happy with that, Councillor Martin, as a response.
Thank you. And I was just seeking to clarify that because I did look at the I couldn't understand why it wasn't the other, but I did look at the code report, which is obviously they've achieved approval of the code with the 3-story, the basement, essentially, as we know, the tactic to lead into the impact application. But on the code report, I mean, one of the major constraints of this site is clearly the 2.8 metre road resumption from the Gold Coast Highway. And so I'm just interested in the code report, all of the setbacks had a pre and post resumption figure, but in this impact report, officers didn't provide a pre and post. So I'm just seeking to confirm. So on the setbacks table, we've got ground floor, so this is to the western setback. It's 0.5 metres, and from levels 1 through to level 12, it's a 4.9 setback. Is that 4.9 after the 2.8 has been resumed, or is that 2.8 coming off that?
Through the chair, that would be the current lot boundary, so the 2.8 would come off that setback.
Okay. So I assume 2.1 metres. So what's the AO up to that 23 metre height from that western setback if the current proposed, the post-resumption setback would be 2.1 metres?
Through the chair, the AO requirement for up to 23 metres is 4 metres to the front setback.
Thank you. And can I just confirm also, so site cover and density, were they calculated pre and post resumption or all pre-resumption figures?
Through the chair, they were purely calculated based on the pre-resumption development.
Through you, Mr. Chair, there's no statutory requirement for us to assess the post-resumption. At the moment, that is the metes and bounds of the site and an applicant's prerogative to lodge an application with those assessment parameters. We've assessed it on the pre-resumption figure, and that is the correct approach to take.
So thank you, through you, Chair. So understand the assessment was done on that, but I suppose it would be relevant for us to consider that the resumption is occurring, especially, TMR have confirmed that, and also there's a bus stop, I think it's 60 metres to the south, and I think even in the SARA referral it talked about that it expects an 8 metre additional lane there to help with traffic flow. So I'm just wondering how then have officers given regard to that future resumption and what will be left with setback site cover vegetation?
Through you, Mr. Chair, in our opinion, it's a useful comparison exercise, but the actual assessment benchmark is about the pre-resumption figure. That's what we assess it under the PO at. As I said before, it's a useful comparison, but the actual assessment is based on the metes and bounds of the current site configuration. Just for interest, and one reason for this is that even though there is a road widening requirement, it may never happen, and also at the moment we're just basically allocating land that could be taken, acquired, resumed at a later date. There is no certainty that it'll actually happen.
Follow up, Councillor Martin?
Yeah, thanks, Chair. I take the point that we may not know the date that it's resumed, but I think the state have confirmed there is some certainty that it at some stage will be. And so when we talk about the city plan, I need to throw a technical question here then. So the medium density residential code, so the overall outcomes, 2B, I think it's number 9, talks about that any impacts, any site constraints must be considered. And I think that gives us, so I take it through that code that we have the ability to consider future site constraints like this. Would you think that that provision of the city plan would give rise to us consider those future site constraints?
Through you, Mr. Chair, site constraints, in my opinion, could be topography, could be flood impact. I think it's important to note that we're just basically set aside land only. We're not no one's acquiring land at this stage. It's just setting it aside. I think a site constraint is more a physical constraint as opposed to an intention to acquire land at a later date.
Thank you. I wonder if officers could bring up that western frontage to the Gold Coast Highway. And just seeking to confirm, with the report talked about that there still would be vegetation retained after a future road widening, after a resumption. That one there. So I'm kind of having difficulty seeing the blue line on this, but just seeking to confirm, so that 2.8 setback, or that resumption, how many of those significant trees would remain? Because I think there's 3 on that western interface.
Through the chair. So the 2 on the frontage of Gold Coast Highway there would, within that setback area, so that would be required to go in the future, considering when potentially that area is resumed. The tree on the corner there at the intersection of 25th and Gold Coast Highway, which is a cook pine, will remain following resumption.
If I could follow up, how do we know they have to go in the future? I mean, they might only shift that curve back 100 mil to allow the road widening. So is there a certainty that those trees will go in the future, or that is an unknown at this stage that is to be dealt with in the future? So can that be clarified, please?
Through the chair. So depending on the ultimate design outcome for that road widening, the trees may be able to remain following resumption.
Yeah.
Chair, in terms of this, obviously was referred to Sarah, and I read some of the information around that. It is, I think the report to TMR talked about that there'd be recommended that there be an 8-metre additional lane, an approach to the bus stop. So I think it's quite reasonable. And I'm just seeking to confirm, Sarah, I think, said nothing should be built west of that resumption line. So I think there's a sun deck. I'm just seeking to confirm, is that going to be, if officers have recommended approval, would that condition be that goes on the plan?
Through the chair. So as part of the SARA referral, a plan was attached which included an amended in red confirming that as per the condition which relates to road winding, no structures are permitted within that road winding area, including the area shown in the sun beds. So that would be required to go in accordance with the SARA referral conditions.
Yeah, and when you say required to go, not built, right? Only sacrificial things can be built west of that resumption line.
Through the chair, that's correct.
Happy to.
Passes to Councillor Patterson for a couple.
Thank you. Through you, Chair. Question, just following up. I'm just curious about that resumption matter more generally, because I imagine this one would come up. So when does it become a matter for us to consider? If the state government have identified that they've confirmed it will be done at some point, what is the trigger for that then to be something that we consider? Like, is it when it's funded? Is it when it's built? Is it
when it's Roger able to provide a bit more detail?
Through you, Mr. Chair, I look at Queen Street going back in time when they built the light rail. There was a lot of, and light rail, there's a lot of road resumption that occurred there. A lot of properties had their front yard decimated. A lot of car parking for businesses were decimated. There's no retrospective planning approvals that sorted that out. So when it comes to a city that's growing, road widening occurs all the time. So in answer to your question, there is no planning mechanism. The problem that we have here is that we're not taking any land, we're just acknowledging it and setting aside a strip for future road widening and acquisition. But that's it. It could happen either as part of an MCU or not. So next door doesn't have an MCU approval. In 5, 6, 7 years, state just comes in and resumes that to land. That changes. It's the same with this development approval. There's no mechanism for us to assess setbacks or site cover or density in relation to this road resumption line. They have a certain square meterage that's afforded to them. That's what we assess the application on.
Councillor Gates, a follow-up question on that line?
It is a follow-up on that. Thank you very much, Chairman. If the building footprint had been within that proposed resumption area, would SARA then have refused the application?
Through you, Mr. Chair, they would have probably made some response, either conditioning it or some sort of information request saying amend your plans. Correct, Councillor.
Okay, thank you.
I think we're back to you, Councillor Martin. Please.
Roger, just on that. So I understand road resumption, and I appreciate what you just said about not having a mechanism to assess it. But under the use of 3 point something, you do have the mechanisms to look at other things once they implement above the 29 metres. I guess I'm picking up from Councillor Martin that the query, as I'm understanding it, is that if the potential road resumption is done and it pushes back to that red dashed line, we've essentially got a hard fence rather than a planted out area, which would be interfacing with a major road. And I'm assuming that's one of the issues. And because the built form is where it is and the outdoor area is where it is, it's not set back even a couple more metres to allow for a planting should that occur. Why was that? And I realise you don't have a statutory requirement because of road resumption, but now you get into the nuance of the officer's interpretation of what is a local character and what is a good outcome. Couldn't you have considered that throughout the process and allowed another buffer of even a metre or so for future vegetation so we don't have a hard concrete wall against the Gold Coast Highway?
Roger?
Through you, Mr. Chair. Look, it's a very interesting question, but there's no statutory mechanism, in my opinion, for us to actually have regard to that. There's the unknown. I know that there's work in the pipeline, according to Councillor Martin, for an extra lane, but there is no certainty. It's not built into the Planning Act. It's not built into the planning scheme for us to have regard to something where there's the unknown and there's the uncertainty of it actually happening. I think we've just got to keep to the hard facts of what the assessment benchmarks are, and this application has been assessed under those assessment benchmarks in relation to the context that we actually know what exists at this point in time.
Follow up?
But I assume, Roger, that the planting that is contained within this proposal here informs the local character context, and that when you then implement the ability to go up, it becomes subjective, I guess is what I'm saying. I wasn't coming in to talk about this today, but in the conversation, a lot of the assessment, once you get into the 50% uplift, becomes subjective to the officers based on, good urban design, topography, local character context. And in every other high-rise development, medium-rise development that's employed 50% uplift, there has been commentary around good planting, local character context. And in this regard, I guess I'm saying my question is, on the way through, once the 50% is actioned, shouldn't it be a consideration on what could be resumed, because it's a statutory resumption area, that maybe setting it back a little bit might have been a better outcome for if and when it does occur? Because, I mean, it's a statutory, it's a resumption area by law, right? I mean, it's there, so it could be done tomorrow. I guess my question is, I guess you're saying you don't have to, but once you get into the subjective nature of the 50%, why wouldn't you consider that?
Through you, Mr. Chair, we obviously try and keep our assessment as objective as possible. I take your point in terms of the word subjectivity, but look,
I don't mean subjective in that you personally get to decide, but it does become more nuanced rather than black and white. I suppose I'm not trying to say that.
I'll just, through you, Mr. Chair, I'll just keep getting back to the term that we've got to keep it objective, we've got to keep it consistent with how we've assessed these applications. We've never factored in what the impacts of road resumption are on development applications in this setting. And there's the unknown. There's the question of whether these trees will be retained or not. The hard work has not been done yet. So I think it's totally inappropriate to start assuming what the impacts of something could be when we don't know what those final plans are.
Councillor Gates, follow up to that?
Just one more question, if you don't mind, Chairman, about the footprint of this building as compared with the original approval. Is it the same, or is this a larger footprint?
Through the chair, I've got a comparison of the two. This one. So essentially the form and the site cover, etc., and the lower tower is essentially the same. We're just looking at some extra levels in accordance with the 50% uplift.
Thanks.
Happy with that response?
Yes, I am. As long as the footprint is the same, I'm satisfied that it was okay last time.
Now we're back to Councillor Martin.
Thanks, Chair. Thanks for the discussion on resumption. Interested in the uplift test, obviously, also the excellent standard of appearance. And I'm interested in the view of the western side and the architectural. I've read a lot of the submissions which talked about, a blank facade, a blank wall, a lot of hard infrastructure. Also, when you consider a future resumption of the green going, how does that, because to me it feels very stark, how does that meet the excellent standard of appearance on that western side?
Through the chair. So as reported on, officers consider that it meets the excellent standard of appearance, as you mentioned. From an architectural perspective, the western facade we consider has an attractive appearance with a high degree of modulation, sculptural features as well as that floating roof at the top, and a good variety of materials and textures. The overall composition, specifically of the western facade, has a good balance between solid walls, semi-solid and glazed elements, as well as the timber elements on the two edges of the built form. The facade's layered with express slab edges and timber look aluminium screening. The solid off-white concrete panel, which I expect is potentially the key issue, has tapered edges and, in our view, resembles thin blades, which work to both offer insulation from road noise, as well as protection from sun penetration to those units. And it creates a clearly identifiable image, which is highly visible and memorable along the Gold Coast Highway. And as I mentioned previously, the western facade is broken up with a deep central recess, which, in our view, makes the tower or the facade reads as two separate slender forms. That recess is approximately 7.4 metres in depth, and it provides some additional sunlight into those central aspects of the tower form. Just in terms of other similar developments in the area, There are other facades on the highway which provide a similar design outcome. The one on the left there is the Greyer development at 152 Jefferson Lane, and it's got those similar concrete elements towards the typical tower floor plate within the centre of the form. The one on the right there is the Magnolia development on the corner of 19th Avenue and Gold Coast Highway, which has a similar concrete vertical element to it. It's also important to note that the way that those two facades are angled towards the highway means they're highly visible. For instance, the Magnolia development, you can almost see that facade from the intersection of 25th and Gold Coast Highway next to our site. In this instance, our western facade is angled perpendicular to the highway, which limits how it might potentially be perceived as you travel through the area.
Thank you. Just on the fencing, I noticed Sarah conditioned a 2 metre high acoustic fencing, no breaks. But there was a point there around the FFL, like on the finished floor level. So I'm just seeking, we've had one instance on the Gold Coast Highway recently that Sarah had conditioned a fence that had no vegetation. It's very high. So I'm just seeking, in terms of a natural ground level, if you were a pedestrian walking along the Gold Coast Highway coming into 25th, are you expecting, is that a 2 metre high fence, or is that going to be above like a flood level? And then, so I'm looking to understand the actual natural ground level of the fence. And the reason why I say that is a lot of the open space and casual surveillance was discussed in the report. So just seeking to understand that fence height and making sure that that will occur.
Through the chair. As mentioned, the condition in the SARA referral requires that 2 metre high acoustic fence, but also requires that to be above the finished floor level. It's not clear as to what level of the finished floor that will be. I expect it's the ground floor level, and that would need to be cross-checked against the plans to confirm if that's at natural ground level or if it's above, because as you'd expect, if it's above the natural ground level, you might end up with a greater than 2 metre high fence required.
Yeah, so that's probably going to be difficult for officers to answer with certainty today, but before full council, can we get a cut through of a plan that shows us that and get confirmation of what that height of that fence from natural ground level from the Gold Coast Highway is?
Yeah, that would be great.
With that?
Yeah, just full. I understand you wouldn't have it, but I'd love to know that detail.
No, very good question and good technical question, and one might be a bit hard to answer on the fly, but we'll make sure we get a formal response before council.
Thanks. Just sort of two more areas, Chair. Interested in the through the report, I was just trying to seek, especially with density so much higher than the I guess the benchmark. Just water and sewer capacity. I saw the water report. Just interested, sewer capacity. I've seen in previous statements the applicant was required to provide reports on sewer network capacity, but that hasn't been provided here. And I know the city had said, yes, it complies. So I'm just interested in why are we no longer asking applicants to test for water and sewer capacity in the context of we're getting a lot of community complaints around desired standards of service. So just how are we ensuring that that will not detrimentally impact that?
Through you, Mr. Chair, as part of our assessment, Councillor Martin, we actually do network modelling for what's proposed, and if that network modelling comes back to say that there is capacity in the system, we usually just go straight to conditions. If there's a problem, we actually send information requests to the applicant requiring further information.
And so, Rog, would you just mind confirming for this application the network assessments for water and sewer, were they both accepted, or was there further information required of the applicant?
Through you, Mr. Chair, that's part of our internal procedures, is to send it to our network modellers for their information.
And there was no network issues identified for water or sewer?
Through you, Mr. Chair, no.
Yeah.
That's why we've gone to conditions.
Yeah.
So could you touch on weren't applications previously external reports were doing that assessment? Are you saying now that there's been a change and the city is now just essentially doing all that?
Yeah. Through you, Mr. Chair, the applicant will always submit their own modelling, their own reports from their engineers. We actually check that and we'll do our own network capacity assessments as part of the assessment.
Okay.
But particularly when they're exceeding the density under the AO.
Yeah. And so just seeking for absolute clarity then, so for water, in terms of drinking water and the fire systems, all of the network is going to be above desired standards of service.
Through the chair, in terms of sewer and water, often there may be requirements that additional information is supplied at the operational work stage, but rest assured the operational works approvals will not be issued until the city officers are fully confident that there's sufficient capacity for each of those services.
Do you mind, Councillor Martin? I think you picked up on one point there. I noted in a few of the submissions and some of the Facebook commentary around like the fire suppression system. So, Roger, would you just mind confirming that at this stage of the application, the information of what kind of fire hydrant, booster or suppression system is going to go in the building isn't available yet? That we know in the water network there is supply to the boundary at this stage of X. I'm not exactly sure how that's measured per minute or per hour, but in regards to the fire suppression in the building, that will be a subsequent information to be provided. That is part of the Australian standards and Queensland standards for construction codes.
Through you, Mr. Chair, correct. Often we don't have all of the devil in the detail with information, and that's why we have subsequent operational works approvals that actually addresses those, so that the finer details. But rest assured, we have the confidence that there is capacity. Just the finer tweaks and the specifics of it are always carried out at the operational work stage.
Which is just, again, I think since we've gone into it, is standard for every development of no matter what form it is that the fire suppression inside a building is dealt with later on. Typically they'll have to install a booster or other systems and do upgrades, but they get to that later. They haven't got to that level of detail yet. Yep. Councillor Martin?
Chair, that's all the questions I have, but when there's no more, I do have a change recommendation.
Any other questions for officers? Councillor Martin?
Chair, thanks for the information, the responses from officers and the report. But I, after hearing that and the questions and the discussion, I'd like to put forward that this be refused, and for the reasons are on screen there. And I'm happy to read through them briefly if you'd like.
Actually, if you wouldn't mind, I think we might take a 5-minute break and let chambers support print copies. Is always easiest when there's more than what can be on the screen at one time.
Yeah.
So we'll adjourn for 5 minutes and we'll get those printed off.
Thank you.
We'll recommence the meeting at 10:07. Councillors, thank you for that opportunity. I trust you've all had the opportunity to have a read through Councillor Martin's proposed refusal recommendation. Councillor Martin, did you want to go through any more detail on that before we open debate up?
Oh, Chair, just very briefly, I could just touch on outlining. Look, the fundamental principle is based on the uplift test, which is under the strategic framework, and specifically it's the excellent standard of appearance and built form at the street edge. In terms of that western facade and the landscaping and resumption. There's also further reflection into the medium residential zone code and the purpose and the overall outcomes that we have there, the overall outcomes and the PO1 of the medium density residential zone code, and also references the landscape work zone code, which relies on areas affected by future site constraints and ensuring that landscaping is retained into the future.
Councillor Martin, could I check with you? So you specifically call out in 1AI the western facade. So your concern with the architecture and built form of the building, the outcome is to do with the western facade fronting the Gold Coast Highway? Correct,
yeah. Both in terms of the actual built form, but also the landscaping, and then coupled together.
Yeah. So I had that question. The other question I had, you have, in a few of these reasons, so like 1A3, once road widening occurs, the landscaping will be removed. I'm a little bit uncomfortable when I think it's been made fairly clear today that there's no certainty of what happens in that road widening area in the future. I don't know about that being in the grounds when we've had a fairly clear answer that there's no certainty of that. You can't say with certainty it will be removed. Officers have no detail to go if it will be removed, or how we rely upon that part.
Well, I think, Chair, I respectfully disagree. I mean, SARA have conditioned and in fact prohibited anything west of that resumption line that is not sacrificial. And so, the decking can't be built. So I think we have, to a degree of certainty, that perhaps I'd be happy to go through and change would be to likely will be. But I think, look, the commentary, I've provided the references to the city plan as to why I don't think it complies, and I've provided reasons as to the impacts and the rationale around those. I think if this were to be mediated in the courts or any sort of without prejudice, I think it just shows the reasons why we can't support the uplift, and so I think they still stand.
So just to be clear, your reasons you put together to attach to the statutory document, the planning scheme, I have no issue with you putting forward. The concern is the stuff that is to do with what is in the road widening overlay and what may or may not happen when there is zero detail available. It's interesting you bring up the mediation, because I don't see how that would be any different than if we got to that. There's no information available what happens in that strip of land in the future. It could be, if we're going to talk about likelies, they might wipe everything out, every tree, every plant, and it's just left with a hard fence. That's the one end of the pendulum. The other end of the pendulum might be the curb gets moved back a metre, they redo the footpath, and none of the landscaping gets touched. It's a big what if at this stage. I just don't know, because you rely upon it in several points.
Mm-hmm.
So we'll go with this. Councillor Martin's put forward a change recommendation. Is there a seconder for the change recommendation? Councillor Patterson has seconded the change recommendation. So I'm just going to put on notice before we go through this that I think before now in full council it would be appropriate to get some legal advice on this road widening section. I'm definitely not familiar with there have been a refusal or grounds of refusal based on a road resumption before, not in the 6 years that I've been here anyway. So I think it might be good to get some legal advice on the grounds in that area and how that can be used. Doesn't preclude the other things you've mentioned, which are to do with the planning scheme and the uplift test. That's fine, but I think some further advice before full council, because a big chunk of this relies upon the landscaping in that road reserve, And I think some further advice for all councillors at full council would be appropriate. For that now, but we have a live motion, and the floor is yours to open debate.
Thanks, Chair. Look, the key elements to this is clearly the road widening and that western facade. I acknowledge, again, I wasn't here, wasn't the councillor when the uplift test came into the city plan, and I'm not disputing that it is a lawful provision of the city plan. A developer can apply for 50% above 29 metres, but the uplift test is there to protect that is not granted just by making the application, and that all individual elements are met, and that it warrants that excellent standard of appearance to warrant the 50% bonus of height, which also carries with it additional density, additional site cover. So in this situation, I guess I'm really troubled by the road widening and the impacts that that's going to leave this development, especially given it is a maximum uplift. Look, I respect and I understand that officers have difficulty considering that as straightforward in the city plan in terms of benchmarks, and to hear that officers have never factored that road widening. But I think we are in new territory. The light rail discussion's been had, but since the state have looked at the road widening corridor along the Gold Coast Highway and they have reconfirmed that, I think it is going to be imminent once we find out the exact detail. But for now, I think I'm really troubled by us not having regard to it. I think we do have the powers to have regard for it because we have the uplift test, which considers the more subjectivity, not hard and fast. Now, I understand it might not have happened before on a code approval because it's not straightforward, but when we are levelling the maximum bonus of height, 50%, where there's very limited examples of it in the nearby area, all the other conditions have to be right. And so I'm really concerned by, and yes, there is an if, but we know the state have said nothing sacrificial west of that resumption line. Yet all the significant landscaping, bar the one Cook Pine on the corner, all the landscaping's within that sacrificial. So effectively what we'd be saying to the community is, hey, the 50% maximum uplift is going in, and there's some great landscaping outcomes, but they're sacrificial. I'm really concerned with what the community would be left with is if, and yes, there might be some variance around what will be taken, but we've got to plan for the worst. And if all of that is taken, then we are left with a sheer face, a wall, a facade, with an acoustic fence 2 metres high, which will stay hard up against decking and pools. And that is my frustration with this, is that there was opportunity on the site. It's a pretty large site for deep planning to be set back, so they are guaranteed to stay. But we've got a larger pool. The pool has, I think, tripled in the size since the code application. We've got a larger pool. We've got decks. We've got all the things for the people that live there. But the interface with the community will be left with a sheer hard-built form. So I'm really concerned with that. I'm concerned with the pattern that leaves. We're going to continue to get impact applications right up and down the Gold Coast Highway through the centre zone. And I don't want to sit here as a councillor down the track and go, oh, I was wrong. It did take right down to the full resumption, and there's no landscaping. I mean, there's no landscaping anymore down the centre median strip of the Gold Coast Highway. So I think it's incumbent on developers, especially when they are seeking full uplift, to make sure no matter what, that deep planting is protected along that corridor. And I think the only way they can do that is by having it set back from a future resumption line. I think councillors would be concerned is, well, what legal framework? Well, it's obviously the strategic framework, the 9-part test. It's the excellent built form and standard of appearance. And the medium residential zone code says that we must have regard to any site constraints. I would consider this a site constraint. Whether it is the exact detail is known, it is a future site constraint. So it is for me about the future pattern. especially when they are seeking the maximum uplift. Thanks, Chair.
Speaker against the motion, Councillor O'Neill.
Thanks, Chair. And I commend Councillor Martin for his stance on this, and I understand where he's coming from. And I may be persuaded between now and full council about the legal aspects of doing this, but right now, having been in council for 10 years and been through a lot of applications on the Gold Coast Highway, which is the transport corridor, and there's probably been road widening resumptions or proposed resumptions for a lot of buildings there. I think we're on shaky ground trying to refuse it on those grounds. So as much as I understand exactly what Councillor Martin is saying, and we all like to have trees and vegetations, but and as we know, Sarah has a lot to say on the Gold Coast Highway about how much landscaping is possible. So unfortunately, I can't support the amended motion today. I'm sorry.
Speaker for the recommendation, Councillor Patterson.
Thank you, Chair. I reflect on the definition of what's sacrificial, and we're talking about land or a portion of land that is intentionally allowed to be removed or impacted. Now that normally says you can put in a driveway or some landscaping or something like that can go. The issue that I have here is that this application would not get up without this landscaping. So for me, that does not meet that definition of sacrificial, because without that, the application isn't valid. And that's why I know it's an unusual kind of way to relate to sacrificial, but given we are doing the 50% uplift, it does bring in these other requirements. There does have to be certain landscaping, and we are now stating that that landscaping is sacrificial. Well, it wouldn't get approved otherwise. So on that basis, I'll be supporting Councillor Martin's change recommendation.
Speaker against, Councillor Young.
I too am sympathetic to the issues that Councillor Martin has raised, and in fact on the 20th of January when we last met there was an application on the highway, and I raised the concern about us not dealing with the ultimate boundary, and I think that it's very subjective. In this case, I'm not deliberating about the appearance of this being satisfied by some landscaping, but I'm aware of the fact that the bulk of that landscaping, not all of it, will go. And in the other case, we didn't have any contention about what the ultimate boundary line would be and what the interface would be to the public realm, whether that be a road or it's a transport corridor, shall we say. So I think that our best endeavours are to identify some strategic outcomes that we want to insert into the city plan along that highway, knowing that there are going to be these resumptions. What's our ambition? So it's articulated clearly rather than on a case-by-case basis arbitrarily saying we don't accept this and we do accept that, because that's where our case will be weakened, in my opinion. So I accept that ultimately if this landscaping is removed, it's presenting a very bad interface to the public, but we don't have much in the terms of grounds to hold our position on that, and we need to identify a strategic outcome in a strategic way. And there's some other provisions of this, the refusal arguments that I'm not comfortable with. For example, 2A Roman 4 says the proposal is inconsistent with the purpose and overall outcomes of the medium density residential zone code, but doesn't articulate what they are. I don't know what purpose and overall outcomes of the medium density residential zone code this proposal is not consistent with, and that needs to be fleshed out. And like Councillor O'Neill, I might have a different opinion at the full council meeting if these things can be properly identified. I don't believe that the proposal does rely on the landscaping to meet the subjective criteria that we've established in the city plan, the 8 reasons. I think that overall the building as proposed has merit without that landscaping. It doesn't die or live on the basis of that landscaping, in my opinion. And so I can't support the refusal. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Young. Speaker for the recommendation, Councillor Gates.
Thanks, Chairman. Like others in this meeting today, I'm struggling with this. I asked a question during question time about the footprint of the building and was it the same as the 29-metre building. I wasn't sufficiently across the prior approval, but in his opening debate, Councillor Martin spoke of the trebling of the size of the pool area, and I'm uncertain of whether that area previously contained landscaping that would have softened the interface should the resumption occur. And so on the basis of that and the fact that I fear that this may set a precedent for other development applications at Palm Beach. We're getting a flood of applications at Palm Beach, and I fear that outlining our intent for strategic outcomes in the new city plan might just be a tad too late to get the outcomes that we all strive for. So I too will reserve my final decision for full council, but today I'm going to support the divisional councillor with his amended recommendation.
Thank you, Councillor Gates. Speaker against the recommendation? I will take the opportunity briefly just to outline why I won't be supporting this change recommendation today. Similar to Councillor Neal and Councillor Young, have got fairly significant concerns that while I appreciate Councillor Martin's view to the future of what it might look like in the future, we make decisions under a statutory document and need to consider the strength of the refusal grounds. Your arguments on the excellent standard of appearance in the medium density residential code are a different thing for me, but when the vast majority of this refusal is based on the possible loss of vegetation in the future, I think that's really weakened it. My personal feeling would have been that you would have had more strength in arguing about that and having a concern about that, but your refusal recommendation being purely on the strategic framework and the medium density part of it would have been my gut instinct. That's a decision for you to look at for now in full council, acknowledging that we will get some legal advice for all councillors on the strength of grounds for that. So on this recommendation today, with all of that in there, which to me is a lot of what if, I can't support the change recommendation, but do acknowledge that you've put a lot of effort into this one and mounted that argument, and I think you have brought forward a really interesting conversation that needs to be had about how we deal with this, because there are thousands of properties, not just along this transport corridor, but along other transport corridors that are planned or locked in the city, where we're going to have a similar thing, where while it says you can't put a building in there, are we going to see that continued outcome? It is a good thing to get further advice on, but I won't be supporting your change recommendation today. Speaker for the motion, Councillor Martin, you may close.
Thanks, Chair, and thanks for the debate. Look, what I would say is that I'll continue to work on this motion into full council, because I did want to come here and hear from officers and seek the planning committee's input. But ultimately, I think it is about the end outcome. I think what I'm trying to protect is not only this, and for future full height applications or applications that we plan for the worst and we get a good outcome. I think I take the point, it's not a clear cut in the city plan, but when you are talking in the 50% uplift range, we have that nuanced ability to consider the whole development, and we consider patterns of development. And so, hypothetically, if we were to, if it were not to be fully resumed, what would be the worst? We would have some additional deep planting. That wouldn't be a bad outcome. But I'm trying to hear plan for the absolute worst, which could be realised. And I think there's a strong case that it would be realised, that I'm trying to protect that we don't end up with a corridor that is blocked out with a lack of greenery. And now we know that greenery is one of the key fundamental principles of softening the built form. And when we're going 50% up, I'm really fighting to protect that softening, that human interface, the character of the area, and all of those things. I think we do have strong legal grounds on to refuse this application that the applicant put forward. We didn't. The applicant could address those issues to make sure that those are protected if they are seeking the maximum uplift. Councillor Young touched on the medium density residential code, and I will firm that up in the future recommendation for council, but particularly I'd like to address it's in the overall outcomes of the medium density residential zone code is design and amenity, and it's the achievement of a high quality urban design. Now it goes on to talk about attractive, memorable, sustainable buildings, but a key principle of the overall outcomes is environment as its own section, and it says environment, the impacts of any site constraints, including natural hazard and environmental based constraints. And I would consider that the environment is a really core fundamental principle of our medium density residential zone code, and without doing this, without regard to that, when we are levelling the 50% uplift, we are failing the intent of that zone code. Mr. Chair, we've also seen Planning Environment Court, and I think, yes, I mentioned the road corridor and the landscaping that sits within it, but also a key element of this refusal is the western facade, and it's the not excellent standard of appearance. We've looked at relevant impact applications on corner blocks specifically, and we have seen the Planning Court just recently overturned one in Tugun, I believe, that the judge talked about all sides, especially corner blocks, all sides need to be excellent. I have real concerns with the starkness of that western facade, and our officers did, and I think it is the same designer that did Magnolia, and I acknowledge that it is a similar style there. However, this application doesn't have 25% bonus, community park given back to the community. That, in the context of the uplift, was discussed. That was dedication. There is no community benefit given back in this application. There's no retail, there's no park, there's no financial incentives through the community benefit scheme. So I struggle with, yes, it might be a similar design, but as we know, precedents, there's other sites are very specific, and in that instance, there was a lot of community benefit. Ultimately, I'll finish with, I can't sign off on the landscaping being sacrificial, because if it all goes, what are we left with? And finally, the 230 community objections from nearby residents raise a lot of these same concerns, and I think we've got to listen to those. And I know it's not the number, but I think they consistently raised that western interface, they consistently raised landscaping. So for those reasons, I think it does not meet the strategic framework.
Debate is closed. Happy with division, Councillor Martin?
Yes, please, Chair.
Just preempting.
Thank you.
All those in favour of the change recommendation? Councillor Fowler, Councillor Gates, Councillor Patterson, Councillor Martin. Against the change recommendation? Councillor Hamill, Councillor Young, Councillor Doran, Councillor O'Neill. That is a 4-4 split. I will use my casting vote to go for the officer recommendation. So the change recommendation is not successful. We will revert back to the officer recommendation. We're back to the officer recommendation, which I'm happy to move and would seek a seconder. Councillor Doran. I think we've had plenty of debate on this item, but I'm happy to defer to Councillor Doran if you'd like to speak on the item.
Thank you, Chair. I thought Councillor Martin raised some really interesting points along the way, and I did get his feedback yesterday as to where he was thinking about this matter, and I told him I'd listen closely as I was on the fence, and I think it's important to note that I was very close to supporting him today, and I think the frustrating thing from listening to the debate today is that I feel as if the 200 odd objections, yes, but the councillor's feedback has been provided on the way through, and I don't believe that what he's suggesting, I think he has some validity in a lot of the arguments around the resumption. Yes, it might not happen, but it would not have hurt the development if there was a metre or two back and it allowed for it. I think that's probably the bit that I'm listening to today, thinking this was a wholly unnecessary discussion around something that could have been avoided if there was some open dialogue with the councillor who was reflecting a community down there. And I think sometimes councillors' feedback is designed to be constructive when we know that there is legitimate grounds for approval, which there is here. I personally don't have an issue with the design of the building. I usually look for height, I usually look for car parking, and that they're all ticking those boxes. But Councillor Martin raised some really interesting points around the uncertainty of what happens in Palm Beach over the course of the next decade, and trying to get ahead of that. And I feel as if the applicant and the officers could have potentially engaged more closely with Councillor Martin on what seems to me to be quite a minor request, in considering what Councillor Gates referred to as her question around the amenity area and the potential. Councillor Martin indicated the growth of the pool area, and so it feels like there's been some choices made that, yes, there's probably a consideration that they're not needed to be made, but I feel like we could have got to a better outcome that Councillor Martin whose objections would have been could have been attended to, and we probably would have had an outcome which would have been either not at committee or supported quite unanimously today. So whilst I'm going to discuss with Councillor Martin between now and full council about what his potential future direction is on this matter, I also would say to the applicant that there's an opportunity here to satisfy the community's concerns as well as the councillors, and we'll keep an open mind to full council. But based on the assessment in front of us, Chair, I think that for all the reasons articulated by Councillor Gates, yourself and Councillor Young, I'm happy to second it and move it and support it today, in the hope that potentially people can get around a room and maybe make a change if need be before full council. Again, as always, I welcome Councillor Martin's defence of his area and desire to just get good outcomes in his area, which is a hotbed for development. But Councillor Martin continues to try to improve it, articulate the community's vision down there, and do his best with the powers that he has to get better outcomes.
Is there someone that wishes to really speak against it? Noting we'll have the opportunity at full council, I suspect, but I'll open the floor if someone wishes to. Then in that case, I might close debate just by echoing Councillor Dora, and that I have no doubt we'll be revisiting this at full council. Before full council, Councillor Martin and all councillors will be furnished with additional advice on the legal prospects around the concerns of what happens in the road widening overlay area and how that can be used. I look forward to that continued debate at full council, where I'm sure we'll get into it a little bit more there. For now, but I'll close debate, and we'll take the vote. All those in favour of the officer recommendation. Division is called. Councillor Hamill, Councillor Young, Councillor Dora and Councillor O'Neill. Against, Councillor Fowler, Councillor Gates, Councillor Patterson, Councillor Martin. It is a 4-all split. I'll use my casting vote and support the officer recommendation of approval. Councillors, that deals with item 6.1. Is there a desire for a 5-minute toilet break before we go on to 6.2? In that case, we'll adjourn the meeting for 5 minutes and then commence with 6.2. Councillors, we will resume the meeting at 10:47 and we will move to item 6.2. Our gaggle of officers are already with us. Good morning, and we'll go for the presentation.
Apologies. Through the Chair, good morning, councillors. Item 6.2 is for a development permit for a material change of use for apartments comprising 720 units, restaurant, shop, indoor recreation facility, and medical centre at Lot 502 Urbana Boulevard in Coomera. The application is subject to impact assessment. The subject site is located within the Coomera Town Centre, which was declared a master plan area in 2009. More specifically, the subject site is located within Master Plan Unit 3B, shown by the yellow outline, also known as Coomera Urban Village. Coomera Urban Village is governed by a planning instrument with its own master plan code. In accordance with Section 315 Transitional Provisions of the Planning Act, the master plan code assessment benchmarks prevail over the city plan assessment benchmarks to the extent of any inconsistency. In this instance, officers were required to assess the proposed development against the master plan code instead of the city plan. Subject site is located directly east of the Coomera Principal Centre, which includes the Coomera Westfield and Coomera Hospital, which is currently under construction. The subject site is also within 1 kilometre walking distance of Coomera Station and is a short distance from the M1 and Coomera connector. The development application only applies to a portion of land, shown in orange, within the subject site, which has a total area of 15,000 square metres. The subject site has two 300-metre frontages to both Foxwell Road and Urbana Boulevard. It is important to note that there are no residential land uses directly adjoining any of the boundaries of the subject development site. The nearest residential dwellings are the 3-storey townhouse development directly to the north. Directly to the west is a council park currently under construction. Directly to the east is a council public footpath, a service station, and Starbucks. This is the latest version of the precinct plan from the master plan code. The subject's development site is located within Precinct 3 urban neighbourhoods, which anticipates apartments. This is the building height map from the master plan code. The proposal exceeds the code assessable building height threshold of 6 stories and therefore triggers impact assessment. The site also benefits from an existing development approval, which was lodged and assessed under the master plan code. The approval includes 4 towers adjacent to Foxwell Road over approved lot 404, shown in green. This proposal seeks to replace those approved towers. The proposed development is for a mixed-use development comprising 720 residential units across 4 high-rise towers. Due to a 5-metre grade difference between Urbana Boulevard and Foxwell Road, the towers read as 21 to 27 stories from Urbana Boulevard and 19 to 25 stories from Foxwell Road. The tallest building is Tower G at 27 stories, 86.7 metres, and Tower H is the shortest at 21 stories, 70 metres. The perspective on screen shows the proposal as viewed from Urbana Boulevard. The development comprises 4 basement levels and 3 podium levels. The commercial land uses are integrated into the podium of the apartments, creating a small and vibrant neighbourhood centre intended for use by residents of the tower and the public. The lower ground level contains an activated frontage to Urbana Boulevard with outdoor dining and seating areas, commercial tenancies, and a large civic plaza to promote community and social interaction. This is a view of the primary vehicle entrance to the lower ground car parking area, forming a new leg to the existing roundabout to Urbana Boulevard. The proposal delivers an attractive entry statement and high-quality podium design with integrated landscaping to soften the built-form edges. The architectural language of the towers achieves a high standard through incorporation of modulation, articulation, varied balcony upstands, vertical recesses, featured battening, and integrated planters within the podium and tower forms. This is the view of the proposal from Foxwell Road looking northwest. The building heights, as you can see, are varied across each tower, and each tower incorporates an attractive roof cap. Each building is on a slight angle from Foxwell Road, resulting in a larger and varied setback. Notably, the proposal includes a 300-metre landscape buffer along the entire frontage of Foxwell Road, which will add substantial greenery to the streetscape edge and screen the podium and lower typical levels. The proposed development has a strong pedestrian-focused environment. The development has 2 publicly accessible pedestrian portals to Foxwell Road with ramps, internal lifts and staircases that connect to Urbana Boulevard on the lower ground level. As mentioned earlier, the proposed development includes a large 5.5 metre wide landscape buffer along the full 300 metre frontage of Foxwell Road. The landscape buffer incorporates a significant number of large canopy trees, including hoop pine species. Key considerations of the proposed development include building height and residential density. The application was lodged in response to an undersupply of residential housing identified within the Coomera Urban Village site. The building height is specifically assessed against the performance criteria of the Master Plan Place Code. The performance criteria includes a statutory note which contemplates additional building height on a merits basis to enable the achievement of the overarching densities anticipated within the Master Plan area. The performance criteria also has a 3-pronged test in that the building height must consider future urban character of the precinct, not result in significant loss in visual amenity, and provide a visual reference point at a strategic location within the site. Officers are satisfied the development achieves these outcomes, noting that the Master Plan Code does not have a prohibition on building height or a maximum building height cap. Officers are satisfied the development results in minimal built form impacts on adjoining properties, and through pedestrian-focused design, promotes active and public transport options with a 1 kilometre walking distance to Coomera Station. As can be seen through these photo montages, officers are satisfied the development is strategically positioned adjacent to Foxwell Road, where a greater intensity of development is considered most appropriate due to being adjacent to a high-order road. In consideration of the building height, officers assessed the current density within the Coomera Urban Village site and identified 620 dwellings are either constructed or improved. The Master Plan Code anticipates around 2,300 dwellings overall. This means the site has a current shortfall of about 1,600 dwellings in the Master Plan unit. The main reason for the underutilised density is due to half of all approved and or constructed dwellings being 2 to 3 storey townhouses within precincts that have a code accessible building height threshold of 4 to 6 stories. As over half of the site has been developed, there is limited opportunity left to achieve the further density. Therefore, officers consider that additional building height is appropriate to enable the achievement of the anticipated density under the Master Plan Code. In support of the proposed building height, officers also considered relevant matters in comparing the density of the Master Plan approval with the City Plan. Officers stressed that this was for comparison purposes only to understand the strategic context. As can be seen, City Plan generally anticipates a greater development intensity than the Master Plan Code. It is important to note that even with the 720 units proposed as part of this application, the Coomera Urban Village site will still be 960 dwellings short of the anticipated density under the Master Plan Code. In response to City Officers' information requests, the applicant reduced the initial proposed building height of the tallest building, being Building G, from 97 metres to 86 metres, representing an overall reduction of 10 metres. The initial outline is shown in red on the screen. Key considerations also included traffic impacts. The site adjoins a section of Foxwell Road designated as a state-controlled road. Officers acknowledge there is current traffic congestion at peak times on Foxwell Road. However, the high traffic volumes are attributed to the state-controlled road and intersections, shown in blue, rather than council road networks, shown in red. The application was referred to SARA, who provided a referral response with conditions. The response noted that the proposed development will not adversely impact the function and efficiency of the state-controlled road. During public notification, officers received submissions from local residents in Coomera. It is noted that 2 submissions shown in blue were received in support from the townhouse development directly to the north of the development. A total of 6 objections were received and 1 electronic petition with 89 signatories in objection. The key concerns are shown on the screen. Officers raised concerns early in the assessment of the application regarding the building height, which was ultimately appropriately reduced. Before concluding, officers wish to make a comment regarding the city plan uplift provisions. Officers have considered the city plan uplift provisions, but for comparison purposes only. The city plan, which is not the relevant planning instrument in this instant, applies a maximum building height uplift of 39 metres, whereas the performance criteria of the master plan code does not stipulate a maximum building height. The master plan code actually contemplates additional building height on a merits basis to achieve the designated densities throughout the master plan unit. The city plan also requires an assessment of local identity and sense of place, which involves a detailed assessment of the local context, whereas the master plan code requires a limited assessment of future urban character of the precinct. That said, there is only one similarity. Both planning instruments allow for the possibility of high-rise development over the development site. Notwithstanding, the application must be assessed on its merits against the relevant planning instrument, being the master plan code. Therefore, city plan uplift provisions are irrelevant to this development application, other than for comparison purposes only. Officers recommend approval, subject to conditions.
Questions for officers? Councillor Young.
Thanks, Chair. Thank you for the presentation. I wonder if you can comment on the history as to why the 3 or 4 story buildings were permitted when we clearly had identified an increased height potential, and that would have resulted in this shortfall that we're seeing now. Thank you.
Through the chair, so the approvals over the site are shown on the screen. Mm-hmm. So officers have reviewed each of the approvals. Each of the townhouse approvals was subject to code assessment. There was no, there is a minimum density trigger within the master plan code, which is 40 dwellings per net hectare. And because such a large volume of townhouses were proposed all in one application, it didn't trigger the minimum density impact trigger.
That seems to be indicating several different applications. Am I reading it wrong? Right,
yeah, through the chair, each one of...
But looks like there are 4.
Each of the different colours on the screen are different applications. Mm. The yellow is 172 townhouses that was subject to code assessment. The one in the green is the Urbana development project. So there's 252 dwellings in there, 81 townhouses. That was initially subject to code. The applicant did lodge a subsequent MCU to increase the height of just the towers in purple. That was subject to impact assessment. And then the pink one, that was also subject to code assessment.
So each of those achieved the minimum density that had been...
Through the chair, correct.
Okay, proposed. So in the vicinity of this, if you don't mind another question, Chair, in the vicinity of this master planned area, are there other sites that are likely to have tall buildings, or is it just here?
Through the chair, the tallest approved residential building is actually within the yellow outline. There's an approval for a 10-storey, approximately 30-metre apartment development. The nearest constructed residential tower is located just to the east, so where that light blue neighbourhood centre is, just to the south of that, and that's a 5-storey apartment development.
Sorry, how many stories? 5.
5-storey.
Thanks.
Yep.
So in the vicinity of the town centre itself, we're not likely to have tall buildings.
What are the height risks? So under the city plan, what are the heights in these areas?
Thanks, Chair.
Mr. Chair, on page 388, that might be a useful image. Oh, there it is.
So those are still to be decided, some of those sites.
Through the chair, correct. So the principal centre is just to the west of the site, and it anticipates code accessible heights between 39 to 54 metres. There's also the Coomera Activity Centre South preliminary approval, which anticipates 1 to 15 stories.
And can we just the blue? I'm guessing where Westfield is and that centre zone land. So while that's a mapped height overlay, there's no restriction. There's no cap on height that could be proposed in there.
Through the chair, that's correct. Yeah.
Thank you. Councillor Young, do you mind? Councillor Doran's got a follow-up question on that same line of questioning. Councillor Doran.
Thank you. Back to on the slide, it was number 6. In reading the report, I arrived at a similar query to Councillor Young. On slide 6 of the presentation, it has the master plan code, and it's broken it down into the legend. There's up to 10 stories, up to 6 stories, up to 4 stories. And this site is up to 6 stories, noting that it's 21 to 27 that's proposed. And that one of the bases is that currently they've undersupplied the density based on the existing built form, what they could have done versus what was permitted on the whole site, and therefore there's let's say a capacity gap for dwellings, right? So that's one of the bases for allowing this to go through. I know there's other metrics, but one of them is that. I guess the question I have is, you can see on number 6 is listed in 3-4 blocks within that particular section. Has essentially they've made a commercial decision to underdevelop the site, but at the minimum density rather than the prescribed density that would have got them to the target dwelling range. And now, as a result of their commercial decisions, now we're using that as one of the criteria to then allow them to go to 27 stories. Am I understanding that correct?
Through the chair, that is correct. The master plan code was written in such a way that it seeks to preserve the site's strategic location and maximise its use to the principal centre and access to the regional infrastructure. So inbuilt into the performance criteria is a statutory note which allows officers to basically sum up all the density within the site at the time of the application and consider any shortfalls in gaining extra density to achieve the overall density.
And can I just ask one more question on this, and then I'll hand it back to the chair? So number 4, as I can see on the plans on that map, the highest portion on that road is yet to be developed. So presumably the same argument will be put forward for a similar style development on the back section there, which has got an up to 4 stories. Is that a fair assumption based on based on the assumption we put forward on this one? Should we expect a similar logic to be put on the current raw undeveloped land within that master plan?
Through the chair, so on screen is the approved development on that particular part of the site. It's a 6-story development, 178 units. That one is a little different to this in terms of its context, in that it is directly adjoining townhouse development to the north, whereas our site doesn't join any sensitive receivers. So while officers couldn't comment specifically on whether we would support a change to this approval, the site context is very different.
So very different, though. In this context, it's one road width. Yeah? Like it's not directly adjoining as you're suggesting this one is, but the difference is not, when you say very different, we're referring to one road width of Urbana Road between the townhouses and the
Sorry, the townhouse development to the north.
Yeah, but you're saying that one's adjoining, that site that's approved you've got on the screen is adjoining other townhouses, right?
To the north, correct.
Yeah, so you're saying the difference between that one on the screen and the one we're assessing today is that's adjoining, and this one, the one we're assessing today is not. I suppose my suggestion to you when you say very different is that this only really separated by one road.
by the road width, right?
Through the chair, that's to the townhouses to the south. There's also townhouses to the north. So any increase in height would potentially impact those townhouses to the north as well.
Yeah. Thank you. So.
Councillor Young, did you have any other questions?
Thanks, Chair. Just one particular about the interface at the public realm on Foxwell Road. You did show, I think, slide 13, some kind of gateway entrance. That's it. And I just wondered if it's likely to be like this, or is it going to be restricted to prevent general public access? I mean, what's it really going to be like? That's pretty.
Through the chair, it'll be in accordance with the approved drawings. This perspective, I believe, forms part of the approved plans, and we also do have a floor plan and an elevation which reflects this outcome. In terms of access, the podium levels are designed to be accessible largely to the public, with the exception of the mezzanine level, which has some restricted areas just for residents.
Okay, thank you. Thanks, Chair.
Councillor Patterson?
Thank you, through you, Chair. I've got a question about the shadowing and potentially wind effects. So my understanding is south of the building, you have a proposed townhouse development and aged care facility, and it notes in the officer's report that the shadows shift quickly and the physical separation allows sunlight to filter through. But when I look at the pictures, there doesn't look like to be any separation in those shadows during winter, and they are quite bulky, and I don't know where the townhouses are, where the residential places are, the townhouse and the aged care, but it looks like some properties will be completely in shade during winter.
Through the chair, so on screen is the shadow diagram, so you're referring to the winter shadow impact. So it does show that it does affect parts of the development to the south, but those are, once again, at very specific times throughout the day. For example, at 9 a.m, part of the corner of, I believe that is the aged care, is available to sun.
So may I ask, would you mind just pointing out where the aged care and where the approved townhouse is on there? Because I'm looking at parts that are in shadow all day, and I don't know if it's the residential spots or not.
Through you, Mr. Chair.
Yeah, that's what I mean.
The aged care is there, and then you've got the townhouse developments in there.
In there. So the townhouse development would effectively get no sun during winter.
Through the chair, it does seem to move very quickly, and that's only for a very short period of time during the day.
No, it's looking from 9 a.m. to 3 p.m, and there's parts of it which are effectively covered from 9 a.m. to 3 p.m, including the townhouse development. I see that the aged care is covered all morning until about midday, but it looks like, if I'm understanding where the townhouse is, it is completely... So the aged care loses all morning sun in winter, and the townhouse almost all sun all day in winter, if I'm understanding that correctly.
Through the chair, that's correct. Officers believe that's an acceptable level of impact. There is going to be some impact, it is acknowledged, but given it is a fast-moving pattern, officers are comfortable with the level of impact.
Councillor Gates, you're up next.
Sorry, if I may just ask on the... I don't know whether there's any wind tunnel consideration. There's towers in Southport that create significant wind tunnels, so I just always like to know, because they do seem quite bulky with a narrow narrow pathway through. Could you comment on that?
Through the chair, ultimately this has to be assessed against the master plan code, and there are no actual specific benchmarks in relation to shadowing impacts, which we actually asked for the shadow impacts towards the end of the assessment, given there are no specific benchmarks in relation to shadow impacts.
Sorry, I'm referring to wind.
Oh, wind. In terms of wind, so we do have a specific... Oh, sorry. Through the chair, the applicant did submit a wind report, so that was considered. The mitigation measures, so there was a model done, and it was put through a tunnel to assess the impacts, and it was determined that the impacts would be to the balcony edges on the southwest corners of Tower F and G. Therefore, they were required to implement full glass window enclosures to the entire perimeter of the balcony. In terms of what that looks like, so that's those balconies there. At the pedestrian level, the report also suggested a metal canopy over the portal directly facing Vauxhall Road to protect resident access users of the development, and then also full height operable glass panels to the mezzanine levels as well to protect users.
May I ask, with the... So I appreciate that there's additions made to protect the site from wind. The sites south of it, will they, what will be the impact on those southern sites? And again, I'm reflecting on buildings where blocks away you have an experience of a wind tunnel in Southport, and I was just wondering what that impact is.
Through the chair, there was nothing expressly in their wind report, like no express mitigation measure recommended in relation to that issue. Officers can double check before full council.
Through Mr. Chair, I might just add to that. The wind report did identify particular points at the road frontages along Vauxhall Road. It's also important to note that the land to the south does fall away. Falls away, yeah, correct. And if you'd like to have a look at page 458, there is a certification of works condition in relation to that wind tunnel report.
Councillor Gates.
Thank you, Chairman. I don't think it's really been made clear to councillors the master plan situation of this application. So I wonder, can the officers please explain that this is the only master plan in existence in the city, why that might be, and why it overrides the intent of city plan?
Through the chair, so it was declared, Coomera Town Centre was declared a master plan in 2009 by the minister then. It was identified, it had strategic importance in terms of its regional infrastructure, therefore it warranted a master plan. The master plan declaration provision was under the now repealed Sustainable Planning Act, so there's no ability to declare a master plan now under the Planning Act. Subsequent to that, the Sustainable Planning Act required the state in partnership with council to prepare a structure plan, and that structure plan had to be endorsed by both state and council, and it went through a period of public notification as well for, I believe, 30 days. It was endorsed, and that's what is shown on screen. It was divided into precincts, and each precinct was required to have its own sort of finer-grained outcomes to contribute to the overall vision of the structure plan. This is the only site, Master Plan Unit 3B, that has had an master plan application lodged over it, because under the Sustainable Planning Act, you would need to lodge a master plan application and get a master plan approval in order to then enact and develop within each master plan precinct.
Okay, so with the structure plan, which guides the master plan clearly, none of that has been adhered to. I'm really struggling to understand why the provisions of the master plan are still relevant, given, as you can see, there was an intent originally to have a network from 1A down to 1, which is the Dreamworld land. It was to be a pedestrian-friendly linkage between the two sites. There was so much that was so very different back in 2009, 17 years ago. And I know that when the officers first sent out their information request, they asked for an explanation of the height because it was suggested that the height was of concern. But there was only 10 metres removed. So can you explain to me, was that all that officers were concerned about when this was a potential 6-storey zone that has now gone to 27, which is just so significantly more than was anticipated? But 10 metres difference down to 86 metres was considered acceptable?
Through the chair, there's two parts to that. I might address the first part. Just in terms of the overall Coomera Town Centre structure plan, that is no longer applicable because, yeah, like I said, under the Sustainable Planning Act, you'd need to lodge a master plan application and get a master plan approval under each of the precincts in order to then carry out development on those sites. This was the only site that had a master plan application and master plan approval, and the Sustainable Planning Act has fallen away now, so therefore there's no ability under the Planning Act to lodge a master plan application to do precinct-specific development like this site, and it is the only master plan approval, as far as I understand, within the city, so the outcomes within the master plan unit are unable to be replicated anywhere else in the city. In terms of the information request response, so officers did request a reduction in building height. The height, as I mentioned, varies between Urbana Boulevard and Foxwell Road. So there's 2-storey difference between Urbana Boulevard and Foxwell Road. So officers were satisfied with how the building read in terms of stories and metres from Foxwell Road, which is less than it reads on Urbana Boulevard.
Do you mean just the appearance? Like, how is it 2 metres different?
Sorry, through the chair, 2 stories.
2 stories. And that's because of the slope?
The grade difference.
Okay, thank you. Can I ask, please, what one of the pages of the report suggests that the proposed built form is appropriate based on sound planning principles. Other than the density shortfall that is suggested, what are the sound planning principles that have been applied, please?
Through the chair, which page was that, sorry?
I think it might have been page 357. No, I read it in the report. It said that it was based on sound planning principles.
Through the chair, the sound planning principles were in relation to the site's proximity to the Coomera Station and Coomera Westfield. The density, this is officers view this as the best place to put the density, given the close proximity may reduce reliance on vehicles. The site is directly adjacent to a state-controlled road, which has direct pedestrian route to the principal centre. So it is the most direct route to the Coomera station, which would encourage walkability. In addition, there is an absence of hard impacts in officers' opinion. As mentioned, there are no sensitive dwellings directly adjoining the site. It is acknowledged there are 3-storey townhouse developments directly to the north. However, and I do have a slide to show this, but there is a adequate separation distance between the tower and the townhouses in the range of between 40 and 60 metres, which is considered an adequate buffer.
Okay, so page 373 identifies the purpose of the Coomera Village Master Plan Place Code to provide for the integrated planning and development of the master plan site. So I'm interested in how officers feel these tall buildings integrate with the site, bearing in mind that the townhouse development is part of the Urbana development. It's all part of the one development master planned area. So how does it integrate with the site, please?
Through the chair, so officers have to bring back the assessment to performance criteria 1 of the master plan place code, and that stipulates that there's a 3-pronged test that all building height must be in keeping with future urban character, and the key word there is future urban character of the precinct. So as mentioned, it doesn't say existing urban character of the precinct. Officers would take guidance from the note directly below it, which does actually contemplate additional height. Therefore, whilst it is acknowledged there are height differences between what's proposed and what's existing, there is no prohibition on that height.
Okay, so that gets me to my most important point of the morning, and that is how officers believe that this is in keeping with the future urban character of the area, because you've mentioned already that the tallest residential building constructed in Coomera is 5 stories. That's the tallest. And the most amusing part of the report for me was the comparison with the giant drop and the suggestion that this is 30 metres less than the giant drop, which is a tourism attraction in the major tourism zone that never required assessment by planning officers. So I really struggle to understand how there can possibly be a comparison between the giant drop and residential buildings across a precinct that is mainly 2 or 3 stories. To the points made earlier too by Councillor Doran and Councillor Young, not only did the applicant go so far under density for the adjacent northern townhouses, they built 4-car garages and huge
Councillor Gates, we're straying into debate now, so we might let the officers answer the question.
Well, the question is how it can possibly be considered that this is in keeping with the future urban character of the area, given Coomera is mostly developed, and what opportunities are there anywhere else for buildings of this height? So if you can explain to me how it's in keeping with the future urban character, I'd be really grateful.
Through the chair, as mentioned, the specific wording of the performance criteria is future urban character of the precinct. It doesn't say of the local area. However, officers did do a wider assessment just for context. But in terms of the actual wording, it does say future urban character of the actual precinct of the master plan area.
So it's restricted to this site alone, the future character of Coomera?
In terms of the assessment of additional building height, that's what the wording says. And through the chair, in reference to the giant drop, I believe the applicant was just trying to demonstrate the local context. That was a plan that they submitted just to demonstrate that it is not the tallest structure within Coomera, and that giant drop retains its height status.
For as long as it's there, but it's a tourism attraction, so it potentially may not be there forever.
If I could, Councillor Gates, just on that same theme, so I may have skipped this part of the report. Is there an acknowledgement to what the future height of the Coomera Hospital is, given it's on top of the highest point of Coomera? So was that part of the information provided or part of the assessment?
Through you, Mr. Chair, to reiterate aspects of what Aaron's already mentioned, I guess we need to compartmentalise that in terms of the envisaged built form intensity of the master plan. Obviously, I think we can all acknowledge that there has been a historic underutilisation of yield and intensity and built form, not just only in the master plan unit, but also in the surrounding catchment. One very important thing to note is that while only one master plan approval was issued within the city for this master plan unit 3B, the greater catchment that was intended to form that larger structure plan is largely reflected in the city plan intensities that have inevitably been adopted. In the same way that we cannot prevent a developer from pursuing a lower intensity development, that has been historically the case in the surrounding catchment. In terms of built form intensity, again, it is envisaged that there is that higher intensity in that surrounding catchment, not part of this assessment, but pursuant to the city plan. In relation to your specific question for the Coomera Hospital, it hasn't formed a stringent consideration for our assessment, but it is acknowledged that there will be that high built form intensity.
13 stories.
So if I can just, Adam, if you wouldn't mind just helping me in my own head here a little bit. So while you have to assess against the structure plan, which is within inside the yellow area, as a relevant matter, you can have consideration to the future intent in the rest of the greater Coomera precinct, which is your point of the fact that city plan fairly well reflects, if not intensifies, what was always intended in this area.
Through you, Mr. Chair, in some respects, yes.
Okay, thank you. Sorry, Councillor Gates, back to you.
That's okay. I've lost my train a little bit, but I just can't fathom the intent for the height that we're looking at. And within the report somewhere it mentioned that these buildings would encourage social inclusion. How is that possible? I mean, on the one hand, officers are suggesting that it's 40 metres away from the existing Urbana development, and then quite the opposite. They're saying it's going to create social inclusion. I don't understand how it can be both.
Through the chair, that was specifically in reference to the Civic Plaza that's located on...
The what, sorry?
The Civic Plaza, located on the lower ground level within the podium. It is a public plaza. It's got ground floor tenancies around the plaza, which will be interchangeably used as shop and restaurant. It does have outdoor dining areas that will encourage residents as well as members of the public to visit this small neighbourhood centre effectively and recreate.
Okay. Can you confirm for me, the state obviously was a concurrence agency because they own the frontage on Foxwell Road or have control of it, and the nearest intersections. Is it true that the state did not propose any improvements at all to the transport network, despite the fact that Foxwell's our second busiest road in the entire city?
Through the chair, I'll pass on to Joel from Transport Assessment.
Thank you.
Thanks, Aaron. Through the chair, that is correct. The state did not impose any conditions for any intersection capacity upgrades. They did impose a condition on George Alexander Way for raised pedestrian crossings on the slip lanes, and they also imposed a condition. The developer did propose some keep clear markings along Finnegan Way, where Urban Village Way comes out at the eastern end of the master plan. They conditioned that they be removed. That was a recommendation of the traffic report.
And the existing residents would have had no idea, would they, that there would be a condition for left in, left out of Finnegan Way, which I believe the state has imposed. Is that correct?
So through the chair, the state, as part of the Coomera Connector upgrade works just recently, have extended the median from the set of traffic lights at Foxwell and Shipper. They've extended that north. That's made Tyrrell Road left in, left out. And the city intends on extending that median further north, regardless of the proposed development. So it's just, what it comes down to is the fact that to try and turn right out of that location so close to what is essentially the gateway intersection to the Coomera connector is just unsafe. So while residents may not be aware of that, it's a safety thing.
Okay, and the intent is for all traffic from these 4 towers to exit the Urbana site onto George Alexander Way, is that correct?
Through the chair, the developer in their modelling has assumed 50-50 split between Finnegan Way and George Alexander Way. Obviously that is just an estimate, that could change. However, at the eastern end of the site, there is, when you turn left out of Finnegan Way, you can U-turn at the roundabout to the north. So that's Finnegan, Sea Green and Lillypilly Drive. But it's important to just remind everyone here that the constraints that we're seeing in the modelling extend from the state-controlled road network, and that influences the intersections on the frontage of the master plan site.
Okay, I have. That's all for transport. I'm mortified, but anyway, Chairman, I have a question that is commercial in confidence that would require us to go into closed session. Would you permit that just for one quick question, please? It relates to the Urbana development.
Unusual for us, but I don't see a reason we can't do it. So Councillor Gates would like to go into closed to ask a question which is commercial in confidence and might prejudice the city or the applicant. I don't need a seconder for that, but we'll take it as it's Councillor Gates and I have agreed to that.
Thank you.
All those in favour, go on closed.
Thank you.
Against? Live streaming off. Thank you. Councillors, we are back in open session, and I'll go back to questions for officers, which I believe Councillor Fowler was next.
Thank you, Chair. My questions were really around the traffic and transport. So Councillor Gates has covered some of them. I think councillors may remember that we did have a report that came to council last year, probably in March, around the Coomera Road network, and I guess the numbers that showed the vehicles per day going down Foxwell Road, showing, yes, it is the second busiest road in the city, but the Coomera Road network in general is at capacity, it's over capacity. I think when looking at this, while I shared some of Councillor Gates's concerns holistically, I'm also looking at 720 apartments in this highly congested area.
Councillor Fowler, we're into debate now.
My question is this, is with all of the bedrooms that are coming, the residents that are coming and the proposed commercial tenancies, do city officers, have we consulted with the city's traffic and transport team who did that report last year? And is the city's transport team comfortable that this development, that we can handle the vehicles that are going to come with this development?
There's our question. Brett, Joel?
Through the chair, I'll pass on to Brett and Joel.
Through the chair, with respect to transport planning, city officers have been working for some time with officers from Department of Main Roads and looking at a second overpass for the M1 motorway. And so we are in the progress of working with state to prepare some planning which we consider will significantly decrease the congestion along the Foxwell Road interchange. And so there are works being undertaken to ameliorate impacts in the area, and those include that overpass across the M1.
Councillor Fowler follow-up, and then Councillor Young follow-up.
Just a quick follow-up. So if that infrastructure doesn't proceed, if the trunk infrastructure upgrades such as George Alexander Way, the signalisation at Urbana, the Coomera connector interface improvements, at what level if this doesn't proceed, all those improvements, do we stop the capacity growth without the infrastructure coming? Like, when does that become a point of contention?
Through the chair, the capacity for this site, my understanding is that it was already been approved through the master plan. So we look at the potential approved capacity in the area, and our modelling and our planning, the purpose of that is to ameliorate the impacts. So we do extensive modelling based on the approvals that are in place, plus many other factors, and we look at possible infrastructure to ameliorate those impacts. So if the road G overpass doesn't eventuate, we'll be looking at other options.
Councillor Young, your follow-up on that line?
I just wanted to ask Brett, what's the proposed location of this alternative or second crossing of the motorway? Can you just roughly indicate?
Yeah. So it's hard to locate it, through the chair, it's hard to locate it from the existing features because all of it is proposed roadway. But you can see it there in blue, the blue dashed line overpass, and essentially it's an extension of Commercial Street at Upper Coomera, and it comes across vacant land, and the alignment would be approximately to the north of Costco, near Creek Road.
Thanks, Chair. So we would anticipate that might be delivered in a couple of decades, given that it's subject to whatever happens in existing privately owned land?
Through the chair, the privately owned land in this vicinity has all been set aside through our road widening provisions, and the city has actually purchased some land directly west of the motorway for the purposes of this new road alignment.
We just did that only a few council meetings ago.
Yeah, I recall. Thank you. Thanks.
Any other questions for Brett while he's at the microphone? Councillor Fowler, do you have any other questions in general? Yep, I'll get there. I've got questions still. Councillor Patterson, I think I saw your hand up before a little while ago. You're comfortable for now?
Yeah, it was just a request to get information from officers on the master plan. Yep. I'm happy to put it. Just note it now. So, information on what was obligated out of the original master plan, and if you can just make that as easy as possible, because I'm sure it's a very long document. If you could just give me a table, what was required and what's been delivered. Thanks.
Councillor O'Neill, questions for officers?
Thanks, Chair. I'm probably seeking some clarification about heights and density in the precinct, knowing that we have a legal requirement to assess this against the master plan, and the master plan says up to 6 stories. And of course, I think the extra density probably is required in this area. Will we be legally required to actually take that into consideration, supplying the extra density in this precinct? And that's why, assuming you've recommended the height levels in that area?
Through this chair, we will be recommending the height as proposed. Sorry,
no, I'm just, what I'm getting at is that are we taking into consideration the extra density that needs to be supplied in this precinct, because there's shortage of density from the original master plan?
Do you mind, Councillor O'Neill, could I try rephrasing that for you in the hope? In the Coomera Urban Master Plan, one of the assessment benchmarks and one of the statutory notes talks to the fact that if there is available density left in the development site, it can be used in other developments. Is that something that, if this went legal, that would have to be considered? It's an assessment benchmark.
Yeah, through you, Mr. Chair. So, Councillor O'Neill, on page 383 and 384, that criteria is copied and included in the report. And as you can see there, that note does... well, I can read it out. Development outside the designated height range will be considered on a merits basis to enable the achievement of designated densities shown in the Coomera Town Centre Structure Plan. So that is a benchmark. It's something that the council should consider when it's making its decision. If it went to a court, the court would also consider that benchmark when it makes its decision.
Can I have an extra question? Thanks. Knowing that the higher building, they did lower it 10 metres. Can you give the reason why that request was asked for by the officers? Why the 10 metres? It doesn't really say that in the report. It says that it was requested and the applicant did that. But was there a reason that you did that, or is there a reason why you didn't ask for any lowering the heights of the other buildings?
Through the chair, we asked for a height reduction mainly because we were cognizant there is a grade difference between Urbana Boulevard and Foxwell Road, and officers were of the opinion that 97 metres for Tower G, which is the tallest tower, was too tall for that interface with Foxwell Road. The applicant reduced it by 1 storey, the tallest tower, Tower G, and 10 metres overall. They did that by shrinking some of the floor-to-ceiling heights through the typical levels, but then also they had a 9-metre height floor-to-ceiling for the upper podium level, creating a very, very large floor-to-ceiling space. So they reduced that to 4 metres from 9.
Any further questions? Question, Councillor Patterson?
So just on that matter, through you, Chair, I recognise that you've identified that the height needs to come down, but it sounds like the response unfortunately creates other problems. I mean, is there any way for you to request, no, we want you to keep your ceiling heights, we want you to keep higher ascents in the mezzanine or whatever it is, because those things are really important as well. I mean, just reducing them, that impacts every unit. It impacts the public spaces. Can we request, no, we want you to take story off and we want you to keep those ceiling heights and the other things that were originally proposed because they're actually good?
Chairman, it's already done, isn't it? Didn't the applicant agree to lower and didn't change the other floor levels? They agreed to a reduction of 10 metres.
I thought you said that they did reduce the ceiling heights.
Through the chair, they did. That's correct. Right. But they're all still compliant. The floor-to-ceiling heights are all still compliant with the minimum.
Yeah. So my point is, it would be better to keep what their original proposal was. Do we have an ability to request that a story comes off rather than they play with ceiling heights?
Through the chair, if I could, when I wasn't particularly involved in the particular negotiations that might have happened here, but all that the city officers can do is make a request. It's the applicant's prerogative on how they respond. So at the start of a process, there's typically 10 days to issue an information request. In that time, officers pull together as much as they can, make the request. The applicant in this instance presumably has responded with their response, and then it's over to officers to actually come forward and put a recommendation based on that response. So we don't have the ability to dictate or mandate a design change to be made. We can make a request and then it's over to the applicant.
Okay, so was there a request made, given you can only make requests, was there a request made to maintain what was good about the development, the ceiling heights and the like, but to reduce the story? Or do we just say we want you to reduce height and there was no comment on the other matters?
Through you, Mr. Chair, officers' assessment benchmarks are quite limited in relation to building height. We did appreciate that there were some grade changes on site and the intensity on Foxwell Road. We did request some reduction in the intensity. Again, like Mick has identified, it's the applicant's prerogative to propose a response to that request. At the end of the day, unfortunately, we are limited by assessment benchmarks in relation to that building height. The master plan's driven towards that density consideration.
I think we're ready to go to Councillor Gates.
Thanks, Chairman. I have given a changed recommendation to the Minutes Secretary, which suggests the removal of 6 floors from each tower. It might sound a lot, but it reduces the impact considerably. It reduces the number of units to 504 from 760. And there's a lot of good about this development. So I don't want to be part of a push for a refusal today. I would like to support the development application in some way. And I recognise the issues that the officers have had in assessing the application. But from 6 stories, as was originally proposed in the master plan, which we must comply with, to 86 metres, it's just too much when there's nothing like this anywhere else in Coomera. So I've also added a condition about delivery to ensure that the project is staged with the first part of the delivery by 2031 and the second by 2036. And that's so that we can, it is mentioned within the report, but that will make it a condition of approval so that we have confidence that it will be adhered to. Yeah, so I'm hoping to get a seconder to remove this. I have asked the officers, and I'll ask them right now so that I'm not putting words in their mouth, but through you, could I ask Mr. Sharp whether he considers this appropriate?
Through you, Mr. Chair, Councillor Gates, the second to last page still has 5 typical residential levels. I think that should be changed to 6, the second to last page.
It does too. I'm sorry, that's my error.
Okay. Through you, Mr. Chair, obviously our preferred approach today in terms of an officer perspective is to support the officer recommendation. In terms of your motion, look, it's pushing it and it's not without risk. It may well result in an appeal by the applicant. However, based on that it is still an approval in a location that should be supporting high density residential developments, we have no objection.
So I have a question on the staging condition. So Councillor Gates mentions that it's in the report somewhere, but it's a new condition. So can I get some commentary around the introduction of a staging condition like that? Because I'm not familiar with us putting dates on staging conditions.
Through the chair, the applicant did propose to stage the development in response to our further information request. So it was late in the piece. We don't typically require staging if the development has all the infrastructure, and this development does in terms of water, sewer, stormwater. So really the only reason to stage the development would be potentially to stage the traffic impacts. But officers did consider that, and given state is comfortable with the outcome, and given that the source of the impacts come from the state-controlled road, not from council road networks, and given they didn't condition staging, officers didn't consider it appropriate or relevant or reasonable to condition staging.
Councillor Patterson.
I've got a question through you to Councillor Gates on this. I don't understand why you would want to say that stage 1 can't commence before 2031, or why you can't use it prior to 2031. If you could explain why you'd like to see that in.
So through the chair, those specific dates were put forward by the applicant, and they tie into the applicant's intended construction timeline. So
okay, I understand that, but why would we be interested in saying we don't want you to be delivering residential units before 2031? I don't understand that.
My purpose was following discussion with the officers. I didn't actually just come up with this myself, but the why I liked it was because by 2031 maybe we'll have some improvements in the traffic network that might actually alleviate the problem that we have right now where people drive out of their driveway into a traffic jam. So 2031 occupation for me was entirely related to congestion, which is indisputable. But if it's going to be a sticking block for councillors, take it out. It's not that important to me. What is important is that these buildings stick out like a sore thumb in Coomera because there's nothing like it anywhere else, and nor will there
Councillor,
be.
we might limit the answer to the question first, and I'll get to you to open debate. That was directed to Councillor Gates. Do you have another question? Councillor Patterson.
My question is whether Councillor Gates would consider taking off the additional condition.
Take the condition out. I'm happy to take it out because it's at the applicant's suggestion anyway.
Yep. So Councillor Gates would like to remove the additional condition. So we'll delete that out for a start. Councillor Fowler for a question.
Just Chair, I'd like to second the motion when we get to that.
Right.
Thank you.
Councillor Gates, I was interested in this where you came up with 6 stories. Why not 5? Why not 7? How'd you come to 6?
Can I be really honest and
Sure.
say that 4 was suggested and I went for 6?
So
because, look, what I actually wanted was to comply with what City Plan intends, which is 39 metres max with the 50% uplift. I would have been really happy with that. The officers suggested that was not possible or advisable, and so they didn't suggest 6 stories to me. I suggested 6 stories off every 6 residential stories. So it's just the residential stories to bring it down so that it's not quite so obtrusive and visible. I mean, we haven't focused on the perspectives, but truly, it's just so out of character in my view. And I'll talk about that in a minute, but it was my suggestion. If anyone else wants to suggest something differently, I'm open.
I just wanted to understand if there was something you're connecting it to. It doesn't.
No, I tried to connect it to city plan, which I thought is our current guiding principle. The master plan had to be adhered to, and it was 6 stories. This is like 21 stories more.
So, and I asked that question because, while if it was a full-blown refusal, you would need to give the reasons to the assessment benchmarks for it. Because it's not, it's amended plans, I still think it's important that we have on the public record the reasoning behind it, because if it does go to appeal, it would be handy to have that from the divisional council of our reasons for putting it forward this way. Councillor Patterson.
Can I just tell you that I met with the applicant maybe 2 years ago, and I did say at that time I didn't have a problem with a bit of extra height. Nowhere in my wildest dreams did I think they'd go from 6 to 27 or 21 to 27. So I'm not opposed to taking some of the load. Coomera's taken a lot over a very long time, as has Pimpamar, Ormo. We've been the highest growth suburbs in the city probably over the last decade. I'm not opposed to taking our share, but this is just a little too far.
Councillor Patterson, your question?
Yes. If I could just request that officers provide us, if you can, example shadowing before full council on what it would look like if 6 stories came off. I do have a concern about the aged care losing morning sun for the whole of winter. That does have a very significant impact. So I don't know if that's something you could provide, but that'd be very helpful. Thank you.
Mr. Moran, do you want to? Is that something that we are able to facilitate?
Mr. Chair, we'll give it a shot. Typically, these things are provided by the applicant's architect, so we can ask. I'll liaise with our city design team and see if there's any in-house ability to do it. And if we can, we will. If not, we'll let you know as soon as we can.
It's a good point to flesh out, Councillor Patterson. I'm sure the applicant and the applicant's consultants are watching or will watch this, and it's a fair question to bring up. Any other questions on Councillor Gates' change recommendation? The good Councillor Martin, followed by the good Councillor Young.
Thanks, Chair. Just for my clarity, I'm just seeking to understand with the 6 stories off, so what stories and height would that be versus under the city plan with the uplift, height and stories? I think we're still about 10 stories over. About 10?
Do you happen to know, Councillor Gates, what meterage with 6 stories off it comes down to?
The report was probably the most difficult I've ever had to read, where half of it's in metres, half of it's in stories. It's been really difficult to make a direct comparison. So no, I don't know exactly what 6 typical...
So I think, Mick, would I be, Roger, anyone, I think if we assume 3 metres per story as a safe estimate, if we said 20 metres as a rounded up number, including a little bit of stuff, so it probably brings the tallest one down from 86 to 66-ish, would be my guess.
Yeah,
through you, is that about right?
Through you, Mr. Chair, it's going to be somewhere between 18 and 20 metres, six stories. So right. If it was 87 metres, it's going to bring it down to 67, 68 metres.
So we'll call it, Councillor Martin would say that, as Councillor Gates pointed out, if this was city plan, it would have been 39 metres at the 50% uplift mark. This one is still going to be around the 65 to 70 metre if it comes down and is successful with the 6-story reduction.
Thank you.
On the tallest building, noting there's height differences, so that we'll have a bit of difference in there. Any other questions before I go to debate? Oh, sorry, Councillor Young, apologies.
Thanks, Chair. So with these change conditions, then obviously, or presumably the applicant has the capacity to reduce car parking and those sorts of things appropriately?
I haven't read through because it's 3 pages of all the required drawings. I'm not sure if Councillor Gates is one of those amended drawings include a revision of the car parking.
It doesn't. The applicant is over in car parking, which I thought would please Councillor Doran. But I haven't pursued that.
Councillor Young, I think that would be something that if this is successful at committee, I'd probably look for the appropriate condition to be worked up to be added at full council if that's the will of
I
committee.
think it might apply to car parking and some other provisions.
Yeah, there will be some other way to deal with that.
Rationally achieved. Thanks, Chair.
Okay, so if there's no other questions, I will go to Councillor Gates to open debate.
Thanks, Chairman. This has been a difficult one. It's the first time in my career that we've had a state member lodge his own personal submission against something. I would have preferred that he did the Dreamworld act and call it in, to be perfectly honest.
Strong start, Councillor Gates.
But he lodged a submission, and I think it's because all of us are aware that there has been an under-delivery in terms of density right across the northern Gold Coast, especially around the Coomera town centre. But for me, that doesn't excuse the need for these buildings to be so far above what was originally proposed. It worries me from the point of view of the young families, and they're mostly young families that have moved into the product that is existing, which has clearly been built right across Coomera and Pimpamar because it's a more affordable product to deliver, which is exactly what we need in the city. It allows the developers to get their money back because there's a greater demand for that, and there has not been a demand for high-rise apartment living that I've been aware of, nor anyone else. There was recently a suggestion for another high-rise on Chipper Drive, but they were going to be limited to 9 metres just across the road. And here we are today looking at one for 86 metres high, hence my attempt to amend the height of the building. But most of the families who've moved in, they thought they were still going to have just 6-storey buildings, as well as the amenities that are attached to this building in terms of a coffee shop and other facilities. So for most of them, it's the largest investment they'll ever make in their life. And I think that we talk a lot about brand and trust in this city, and we're working so hard on our brand and the trust that the community has in us. And I wonder how they'll ever trust us again if we approve a 27-storey building where their master plan that they bought under indicated 6 stories. The traffic is another major concern, and whilst the state has suggested that there's no additional impact created by this, I understand the state agrees that the whole network is crammed and that we'll just have to get used to it. Residents will just have to get used to it. I don't agree that they should have to get used to it. I think that we should be providing the infrastructure necessary to support these growing communities. I recognise that we have to carry our share of the load, and the Northern Gold Coast has done that admirably over the last 20 years. For 10 years or so, the area was growing at 13% as opposed to 3 or 4% in other parts of the city. I think we've fallen back. I think Urbana might have outstripped us in terms of growth at the moment, but and traffic. Never miss an opportunity. But the densities that have been delivered have created traffic chaos. So heaven knows if we ever get to the densities that original structure plan from 17 years ago, which is guiding the assessment of this development today, heaven knows where we would be. It's nearly 30 years now since Coomera was identified for urban development, and I'm sure that everyone involved at a political level felt that we would have the infrastructure we need to support urban development. But unfortunately, we haven't, and we realise that we have to grow the population, get the rates, dollars and the support of the state and federal government to resolve the traffic issues. But I think it's going to be far more palatable for the local community to accept 504 additional dwellings rather than the 780 that was originally proposed. the shade, as discussed today, is for me a huge issue, especially for not the townhouses but the aged care. These old folk, I've just come back from my mum this weekend in an aged care home. They need some sunlight. They need to enjoy their fading years, not be blocked with shade all winter long. So that's a major concern for me. There was some comments about merit-based decision making and that each application should be considered on its merit. And I think there's merit in providing these units. It's a different product than has ever been provided at Coomera before. It certainly doesn't meet the urban character requirements, in my view, at all. So I really struggle with that. But yes, it's going to provide a different type of product that might allow people entry into the market. So, you know, it was suggested to me today, why didn't I go for a refusal? I don't want to go for a refusal. I want people to be able to have access to their own home in this city, but I want it to be reasonable, and I don't believe it's reasonable at 21 to 20 stories high. Councillors, I've represented Coomera now for almost 18 years, and I hope that you can appreciate my concern about these historical documents being the basis of the recommendation that we have received today from the officers. But by recommending the removal of 6 residential levels from each of the towers and requiring the removal of 216 dwellings, I hope that you can support me and agree that it is a more reasonable outcome in 2026 than working from a structure plan that was delivered in 2009, to which many of the outcomes have been scrapped and never adhered to. And this is the one remaining master plan in our city. And so I appreciate the work of the officers. They've been very helpful to me in discussing this application. But for me, to approve what's been suggested would be outrageous, and I hope for your support today.
Speaker against the change recommendation? I'm happy to speak against the change recommendation. I'm coming at this from the broader city context of requiring 185,000 dwellings to meet the city's population of 1 million residents plus tourists in the early 2040s. These dwellings need to be spread across the entire city, and unit tower development needs to be spread across the entire city, not just left to the coastal strip to cop all the tower and unit development. We require it and have envisaged this kind of development in suburbs like Coomera, as Councillor Gates pointed out, for a couple of decades. And while it hasn't occurred to date, this is an opportunity to hopefully see that style of development start to occur in this area. We have a proposal for 720 dwellings in a location that has available infrastructure. There is water network availability, sewer network availability, stormwater network availability. It's all built, it's all in the ground, it's all sitting there underutilised. The site is extremely well located to public transport, the Coomera Town Centre, existing and to be delivered medical services, including the under construction Coomera Hospital. It offers a variety of public and private schooling options and access to significant employment opportunities. It is also well serviced by some of the highest quality community assets in our city, like the Coomera Indoor Sports Centre and Pimpama Sports Hub. It also enjoys great proximity to major parklands like Bimbimba Park and the under construction $10 million Kirkin Adventure Parkland, both of which are a walk or ride away from this site. It's also within walking distance of the proposed Coomera Civic Hub, a project that has been designed and remains in the budget to accommodate a population in Coomera that includes these anticipated dwellings. Literally every ingredient that is required to support new dwelling supply, every ingredient that our residents have said are the things they should be there to support new dwellings. That's why I'm really struggling with the concept of removing 200 of these dwellings when not a lot of reason is given for that. Let's just take 6 stories off and remove 200 dwellings. I don't have a corresponding reason why to do that. I very strongly acknowledge that Foxwell Road is a congestion hotspot. However, With the recently opened first sections of the Coomera connector and future stages to roll out over the next few years, this will make a significant difference on Foxwell Road. There is already thousands of cars moving down this road every day, and as more sections open, tens of thousands of more cars will be able to avoid going all the way down Foxwell Road to get onto the M1 to travel north. And hopefully, with some future state announcements, they'll have the option of heading north in the Coomera connector as well. I also note and think it must be raised that Foxwell Road is a state government road, and that the state provided a clear SAR referral response relating to traffic, which confirms that the state have no concerns with the proposal. The state is comfortable with the level of impact of the existing state-controlled road. A development of this size would take over a decade to deliver. Within that time frame, there are additional road projects planned around Coomera that would ease the issues on Foxwell further. Progress on one of these main projects was recently made, with the city purchasing tens of millions of dollars of land in Coomera to assist the new highway overpass, as shown on the maps today. Beyond what I believe to be the absolute logic of this many dwellings in this location, I also want to have a look at the prospects of defending this position in court. The Coomera Village Master Plan has specific wording in it that calls out unused density to be absorbed into later stages of the development. It also purposely, it would seem, has a lack of height restrictions in its assessment benchmarks to facilitate this outcome. Performance criteria PC1 of the Master Plan Place Code does not stipulate a maximum building height. Therefore, if we go to appeal on this and end up an appeal on this, I don't know what assessment benchmark we're holding this to in a reduction of 6 stories. The most likely grounds to run an appeal on would have been visual amenity. As detailed in the officer report, the applicant has submitted a visual impact assessment prepared by an expert of the court. That report concludes that the proposal will not have any significant impact in terms of visual amenity. The main reasons include a good separation distance between towers, variation in height, resulting in interesting skyline. The towers are also angled away from Foxwell Road, resulting in large and varied front setbacks along Foxwell Road. While I'm not a lawyer by any stretch, I genuinely see very limited prospects of defending an appeal when the assessment benchmarks, as so clearly set out under this master plan, encourage this style of development. While it wasn't mentioned in questions of debate, I think it is worth noting that this development would receive an infrastructure charges notice for $23 million. That is $23 million that rightfully would be expected to go into roadworks around Coomera and other critical projects in our city. 720 dwellings, 1,300 car parks, significant existing capacity and infrastructure, 40 to 60 metre separations to the closest existing residential, no hard impacts on existing houses, access to fantastic local services, schools, public transport, shops and community facilities. We are in a dwelling crisis, and I genuinely do believe that this development should be supported at the scale, and would encourage councillors to support the officer assessment of the proposal under the Coomera Urban Village Master Plan and support this much needed dwelling supply in our city. Speaker for the motion, Councillor Patterson.
Thank you, Chair. There is so much that I like about this development, and I think the Chair has expressed those very clearly. I want to see us say yes to affordable accommodation, more residential, and I'm totally clear that this area has been highlighted as an area that should be accepting it, close to heavy rail, close to shopping centre. If this concern that I have can be addressed or, for me, fixed before council, I could change my view. But right now, I cannot vote for something where, and I'm reading from the officers that they say that this shadow has adverse amenity shadowing impacts, that it does impact on an aged care facility and approved townhouse development, and it moves quickly from morning to night, and physical separation allows sunlight to filter through. I read the words, but when I look at the images of what actually will happen, that they don't connect. To me, it does look like seniors in our community who are in an aged care facility will lose their full sun on winter mornings, and that is not acceptable. I want to say yes to this. I want to say yes to the full residential that is allowed. And in fact, I probably would have even supported a taller but more slender building so that those impacts wouldn't be there. But given they are, right now, I will be supporting the change recommendation put forward by Councillor Gates.
Speaker against the change recommendation. Councillor Gates, back to you to close.
Thank you, Chairman. I think no one recognises more than me the need for housing for young families, because the northern Gold Coast has been the area that young families have been driven to over the last 20 years because it's been more affordable, and hence the staggering details and numbers of young people as opposed to other parts of the Gold Coast. But whilst recognising that, I don't believe that Coomera or the city in general can solve the housing supply crisis. We have in this city really unique geography. We're lineal. We have a really poor public transport system, and I know these are things we haven't talked about earlier today, but they all go toward the outcome that we're seeking, which is more homes in the city, but in a sensible way. And in your rebuttal of my suggested change today, Acting Mayor, you mentioned the most likely grounds for an appeal being visible amenity. I disagree with you entirely. The most likely grounds for an appeal relate, in my view, to the fact that this is not in keeping with the future character of the Coomera area. That's highlighted in the structure plan document. It said all buildings must be of a height which is in keeping with the future urban character of the precinct. And I mean, the hospital's going to be 13 stories. We have one 5-storey building. We have some 15-storey buildings proposed in the north and the southern section of the old Coomera structure plan. But this is so far above what is proposed in those areas. I don't see how anyone could argue that it's in keeping with the future urban character of the area. As far as the traffic's concerned, I think the state's position is, well, people will just have to get used to it. Well, I don't want them to have to get used to a worse situation than they currently have. And I'm very pleased to know they don't think this will be an additional impact on the transport network. But I'm far happier with residents from 504 units tackling Foxwell Road for the next 5 years than I am with 720 or more. So, and that's just the unit numbers without the multiplier of the people who will occupy those units. So, all in all, I think I've said enough today in terms of my reasons for moving the motion to reduce the height. Councillor Patterson has nailed it in regard to one of my major reasons, which is the shade that this casts across the properties on the opposite side of the road. I just believe it's untenable to do that to all of the people who've bought there, who will rely heavily on sunlight. So I don't want to see these buildings at the level suggested that will be visible from every direction. I mean, the giant drop was highlighted as a comparison because of its height, and we all know how that sticks out from every angle of travel across northern Gold Coast. I don't want to have just 4 buildings of the height suggested impacting on the area when it's not in line with the character that was initially proposed by the master plan and is still quite different from how the area has developed. That's it.
Thank you, Councillor Gates. Debate is closed. we'll take the vote. All those in favour of the change recommendation? Again, we'll call it a division then from the look of it. So Councillor Young, Councillor Fowler, Councillor Gates, Councillor Patterson, Councillor Martin, Councillor Doran, Councillor O'Neill. Against is Councillor Hamill. The change recommendation is successful. Councillors acknowledging the time. Councillor Doran, if you wouldn't mind stepping in and chairing the rest of the meeting, I've got another meeting to go to that the Chief of Staff is waving me down for. Councillor Doran has adjourned the meeting for 5 minutes, please.
Okay, we're back for agenda item 6.3, and there's a presentation. It's only closed if you have specific questions, so before you ask your question, just maybe we'll consider that.
Mr. Chair, we don't have a presentation for these ones. Sorry. Through you, Mr. Chair, typically we'd just go through the report itself, provide an update if needed, or answer any questions. Yeah.
So we'll go to questions. Councillor Fowler.
Should we go to closed?
Is it specific in nature?
Yes.
Yeah. Move to close. Seconded by Councillor Gates. All in favour? Live streaming off. We move. We're carried, so we're going to go back into open. Just before we went into close for matters relating to legal advice or legal proceedings by or against the local government, and that was on the screen. Now that we're back, does anyone wish to move 6.3, the quarterly appeals report?
Yep. I have a question for
more questions.
Yes.
Councillor Martin.
Thanks, Chair. Just query on process around how some of these court matters, whether they're resolved or judgment, how is that being circulated back through city assessment? And the reason I ask is some judgments, that might have approved. There's been some decisions that might have been approved through council and then things change. I've noticed a couple pop up in some other applications that may not, that still say they're approved, but there's actually been judgments. So I'm just interested in the process around how that is circulated back so that future assessments are, relevant.
Through you, Mr. Chair, we do try to provide updates internally of any legal learnings from an appeal. So our panel firm do usually provide an appeal summary report of the key chronology of events that have transpired, and we provide that internally to officers. Similarly, as you know, we did a legal training briefing that was an update on all of the Hyde uplift cases in 2025. So we do try and keep internally that continual learning of any sort of court judgments as they come through.
Moved by Councillor Young, seconder, Councillor Fowler. Councillor Young. All in favour? Carried. The last one for today is 6.4. Understand that was unstarred by Councillor Marshall, but you don't require a presentation. So we'll move straight into questions unless anyone has any objections to that. Straight into questions rather than presentation. When they're good to go, Councillor Marshall.
Through you, Chair. Thanks, Matt, and for the team for doing the report. Obviously, this was a petition that came through about some illegal camping and homelessness, I guess, in where my new office is now, where we've just moved into the Broadbeach Cultural Centre, and I would imagine most councillors are dealing with enormous amounts of homelessness at the moment. Certainly anywhere I've got a toilet or a shower, we've got a bit of a camp developing. But the main, I guess, emphasis of my question through you, Chair, to Matt is, I think from the public's perspective and for ours, can you just explain, what is the process that you might want from a councillor, but also what is the process that city officers can do to move homeless on, and where, I guess, our limits are, where the state takes over, that sort of stuff?
Through the Chair. Councillor, our responsibilities as a city is to manage and regulate the local law when it comes to homelessness. So generally, what we see across the city is when a person experiencing homelessness is camping or living in a public space, they are breaching the local law. So those requests can come through our city app, Report a Problem app, or through the councillor's office to our local law team. Our local law team will then assess that, and through our new compliance strategy, which was endorsed by Council in May of 2025, our officers will engage with the individuals and they'll educate them on local law and issue them a verbal move-on direction. If the person has not complied with that direction, we'll come back after a certain amount of days and issue them a compliance notice like we would any other local law breach across the city. That compliance notice will detail what the individual has to do to comply with the local law and within a certain time frame. And it's at that point, councillors, that our officers would be considering the human rights and any limitations to someone's human rights in that compliance time frame and action that's required. If the person still has not complied after that notice is issued, we would go back at the end of that period and issue what's called a performance of works notice and achieve compliance on that last day. And that's where council can basically perform the work to ensure that that public space is managed in line with the local law. And generally what that would look like is working with the individual to clear any items from that space or cease breaching the local law at that particular location. In terms of the state government and their requirements, so they are accountable and responsible for housing and homelessness specialist services. So the Department of Housing and Public Works and Specialist Services will engage with individuals and offer them pathways in their housing and also specialist homelessness services. We do meet with them once a week, and what our team will do is if consent is given by an individual who's experiencing homelessness, we'll pass that information on to those particular teams who will then go out and engage with those people themselves and look for those pathways into those services. In terms of from a police perspective, we do partner with police every Wednesday. So we do joint compliance operations, and police will manage any crime or antisocial behaviour as per their powers and support our officers as needed on those compliance patrols from a safety perspective or if there is any issues. And the other thing to mention there from a city perspective is our city cleaning team play a fantastic role as well, supporting cleaning up abandoned sites across the city, which we see quite a bit as well. I think that might cover your question.
Just to follow up through you, Chair. Thanks, Matt. That's perfect. I guess just from a public's perspective as well, just to highlight, our city officers go out, and a big shout out to Darren, who's in my area, works really hard on that. But once a person who is homeless or living rough becomes aggressive, what's the process there? So through the chair, if the individual's been aggressive to our officers, so our number one priority is our officers' safety as well as the public safety, so they will remove themselves from the situation, and that's when we will engage police who will come along with us to support us in that compliance action.
Councillor Patterson.
Thank you. Through you, Chair, Acting Chair. I've got a question. I see in your city actions you've identified that a protective services officer is patrolling the precinct during library hours. That is excellent. So a PSO, a protective services officer employed by the city, is patrolling a city-owned space. That's a public open space. So my query is that something that can be requested in other spaces? For example, Nerang Street Mall.
Through the chair, yes, those requests could always be made, and we could assess how a security officer or a protective service officer could add value in those locations. So yeah, we could definitely look at that at different locations to see what value they could provide, whether it's a deterrent effect, whether it's being able to engage with people to educate them. In terms of public space management, like our parks and our roads, the protective services officers don't have powers under the local law, so they can't issue formal move-on directions, but they can engage our city laws officers. Yes, so this is what this PSO is doing, right? Because it's... Could you just say that last bit again, please? So I just missed that. No worries. In parks and roads, yes, protective services officers aren't authorised under those local laws, so they can't issue directions like a city laws officer. They are different roles. So I think that answers your question. So does this come under this precinct? Does that come under that as like a road or a park? Through the chair, there'd be various local laws in this precinct due to the road area, the park area, the city facility area and the library. Protective service officers do have powers in some of our libraries and our facilities to issue exclusion notices under the local law. I understand within the library, but this is saying that the PSO is going to be acting outside the library. So my understanding is they're going to be acting in an area where they wouldn't normally have authority. That's the authority of the police, but they are there patrolling so that they can do what they can within their capacity, but they can't move on there. Is that correct? Through the chair, yeah, that's correct. They will engage if it's safe to do so and educate and give people some advice. In terms of the formal request, that would go to the relevant local law or police team, depending on the matter. Okay, so you are aware of the significant threats in Southport right now, and in fact, my team have just, someone was arrested and went to court because of threats against my my staff. With people who are in my office, however, those people are also outside in Nerang Street Mall, and then as soon as they're outside the office,
sitting outside my office on a park bench after action, which ultimately has them arrested because it's criminal behaviour. I also have, there is a question here, I also have our cleaning staff can't clean in Narang Street Mall without a police escort. I'm wondering whether, and the issue is we do not have police resources. Can they do that with a PSO? Is that possible? Given that this is, I have not seen this before, where you have a PSO actively patrolling in a public open space, which is effectively a road and park outside an area like Broadwater Parklands. So this occurs to me that we could be doing this in Narang Street Mall, having PSOs, supporting our cleaning staff and the like.
Through the chair, it's definitely something we could assess and get back to you a more comprehensive response.
Okay.
Yeah.
Great. Thank you.
Councillor Martin.
Thanks, Chair. Just on the process that the city undertakes, just wondering if there's finite timings around, when there's a first discovery and a move on direction to getting to work order. Is that set the same always, or is that site and individual specific?
Through the chair, no, there's no specific timeframes set for those because an officer does have to assess each situation based on its own merits and its own case, which includes assessing the human rights at that specific location. So generally the officers will assess and make that call based on the size of the camp, the ability someone has to actually comply with the local law. It can take some time. It's not something that can always happen overnight, so we do have to assess that when we give our directions.
Thank you. And just follow on, Chair. So there's been, obviously for Burleigh and really the whole city, there's been a lot of commentary about this, and I guess I'd be keen to get your thoughts on comments. I think that it's come back from the state, given that they've also, housing have gone through. I guess I'm just seeking to understand our local law. So I think the assertion is that if the state housing services go through and an individual either refuses or doesn't want to engage with services, so doesn't want housing, does the city then instantly have the power under the local law to remove material? I get the city cannot forcibly remove someone. We don't have those powers, but that's what's been in the media, that if someone has refused housing, that the city can then issue a work order to remove the tent or whatever they are living in, the materials. Is that accurate?
Through the chair, no. So we wouldn't be able to just, because someone has not accepted housing, forcibly remove them. We would need to go through the exact same process that was explained before and consider all those elements in our compliance action.
Thank you. And just seeking, is the city doing, this has obviously started with a petition in one localised area, but it's an area that affects the whole city. Is there further work being undertaken more broadly with the city and this space and working with the state on this issue?
On if you, Mr Acting Chair, Councillor Martin, Matt and his team and Luke as well, we're working through a whole new protocols on this at the moment. We're hoping to have a submission ready for budget when we start discussing the budget process. So haven't got anything finalised at the moment, but can confirm that it would be whole of city, and then re-looking at our programs and our processes and how we go about it from there. And part of that is absolutely working with our colleagues in the QPS and working out where they can fully assist us and assist us more, which Matt and his team are doing brilliantly at the moment and have pretty good relationships there as well.
Great. Thank you.
Any more questions? Does anyone wish to move the item? Councillor Young, seconder. Councillor Martin. Over to you, Councillor Young.
Mentioned this briefly. It's reports very specific to the Broadbeach Cultural Centre, and there was a petition raised, and the report addresses the constraints and difficulties dealing with this issue of homelessness, which is not restricted, of course, to the Broadbeach Cultural Centre. We're experiencing that all across the city, and I know it's of significant concern to a lot of people on both sides, you might say, in that some people will actively support those people, bring food to them and administer social interaction, which is really healthy, and there are others that only see a blight on public space, the fact that people are occupying public spaces and littering it and not taking care of it in the traditional form of a park or recreational space. So we do have that conflict and contest in our community itself. So the report addresses what we can do, what we can't, and I'll be using it to inform locals in my area who've raised these issues with me. Thank you.
Does anyone wish to speak against the motion? In that case, all in favour? Carried. The acting mayor's returned, and with that, I close the meeting at 12:56. Cheers.